Hello everyone, this is What If Fanfic and today I'll bring you What If Naruto Created an Organization Part 2. The link to the story will be in the description. If you want to hear a fanfiction please comment down below. Now on to the story.
036. Smell Ono Tsubaki's letter left in a postcard the same day Doihara Taiki's left in a postal ship. The letter reached a small Konoha outpost in the Fire Country in 5 days' time, after which it only took 1 day for a messenger hawk to fly it to the village. The report hit the mission desk just before the end of Umino Irika's shift, who read it through and smiled, satisfied that Naruto was enjoying his downtime and getting along with the locals well. Really, a fire brigade. He was growing up nicely. Danzo got a copy of the report, as per his orders to keep him informed of everything and anything that concerned the Jinchuriki, the next morning, and he knew something smelled fishy there. He was Konoha's unofficial, but also undisputed champion of circling around the truth in his reports, both written and verbal, in a way that made the poor concept faint from the vertigo. He couldn't put his finger on any single word or sentence, but the whole practically screamed plausible deniability. Together with Jiraiya's letter, which asked for news about Uzumaki since his informant in Makimura had not reported to him, the stench reached to high heavens. Was Ono in league with Orochimaru after all? Had Uzumaki been turned or captured? Sandaime had been entirely too trusting with the woman and Godime had followed his unfortunate example. Your name for the purpose of this mission is Sai, he told the young shinobi, at Route 522, who was kneeling in front of his desk. You have successfully completed a C-class escort mission, the details of which are in this file. On your way to Konoha you will stop in Makimura and surreptitiously make contact with Uzumaki, assuming he is still in the town, and find out his true circumstances there. Be prepared to eliminate Jounin Ono if she shows signs of treachery. He presented a manila folder and his operative rose from the floor to accept it. Yes, Danzo-sama, his operative said and stood there alertly, yet his body language subtly submissive. The pale face was like a porcelain doll's, perfect and perfectly emotionless. Danzo frowned. The root-raised operatives were his most loyal subordinates, most trusted as far as he trusted anyone, and that was the reason he had picked one of them for the mission. Uzumaki had in the past showed remarkable ability to establish rapport and compromise people with similar past experiences to his own, and Danzo wanted to keep the common frame of reference as small as possible, hence the very opposite of Uzumaki, one raised with harsh discipline, with no purpose beyond the mission and Konoha's best, one whose steel hadn't been chipped and dulled by the senseless prejudice of people. No personal tragedies ever occurred en route because nothing was personal there, not even their own selves. The downside to this, though, was that the root-raised were rarely apt at faking humanity. Smile, he ordered, and the operative's mouth curled upwards and he allowed his eyelids to slide closed. Danzo had to hold back a grimace. Practice that in front of a mirror and purchase a book on human interaction. You are not to allow the target to engage in ethical debate with you under any circumstance. Do you have questions? The operative correctly took this as a dismissal and left, leaving Danzo to the rest of his reports. Jiraiya suspected several high places Iwagakure Jounin of working together with Kakuzu, an S-ranking missing nin of Takigakure who was now suspected of being a member of the elusive Akatsuki. Their goal appeared to be to assassinate a high-ranking Jinan team leader with political connections and framing Sunagakure for hiring Kakuzu, apparently in hopes that Suna working together with the man who tried to assassinate Shadaime after the Chunin exam invasion would sufficiently enrage Konoha to fully commit to a new war. Jiraiya had narrowed the possible targets down to Sarutobi Asuma and his team based on the fact that he was Sandaime's son and his Jinan were all future leaders of their influential clans. This would have to be dealt with. But the situation might be a possibility as well. After all, more than one person could play the game of framing. He had for some time kept an eye on a young Iwa Jounin called Datara. He was A-class already and had the potential to reach S-class status within few years, much too dangerous an asset to allow for Iwa to keep. His spies had reported that the young Jounin was somewhat emotionally unstable and apparently involved in a codependent relationship with the young Chunin of his village. Maybe if the girl was to die and it appeared Kakuzu's work, it would drive him to blame his Kajin teacher? There were definitely possibilities. So Danzo concentrated in turning a bad situation advantageous to Konoha the best he could, trusting that the Uzumaki situation was under control at least for now. He might have been a little less confident had he known that the book the newly named Sai bought was Personhood, The Art of Being Fully Human, an opus which, despite its name, was not a psychology book at all, but a religious one about enlightenment of soul, written by a leader of a small free love practicing cult. 037. Sound that same day at Makimura, the Fire Brigade girls were preparing for the sports festival the next day, with the help of the inn girls and the casino boat girls. Since it had taken Naruto that long to get the approval not only from the police chief, but also the mayor and the Makimura Municipal Council. The event ended up conjoined with the opening day of the 2 brand new inns in the town. Tourists were enjoying the excitement and the locals were running in frightened circles. Miwa had never thought herself the sort to enjoy pettiness, but she was having grand time watching them fretting over the kindest, gentlest person she had ever known. Tents were being set up, the arena was being prepared near their normal practice ground on the beach, and some of the inn girls were baking in preparation for the festival. Move it to the right a bit. Now it's good, she ordered around some of her friends on where to put the podium. She wanted to have a beautiful background for pictures, and rooftops peeking over the tree line would have ruined the scenery. Phew. Now it's all done. Yuriko wiped her sweat off and smiled at their accomplishment. She was Miwa's best friend and the one in charge of the new Fire Heart Inn. Wind was playing with her long, black tresses, and Miwa wished for a moment that she could be as beautiful. Maybe then Naruto-kun would. Life sure has been grand lately, hasn't it? Yuriko laughed and even her voice was alluring. Ah. Miwa-chan, you look fine. A voice called from behind her. Miwa turned to the direction of it and met the eyes of Morino Adate. He was carrying a small parcel wrapped in bright red silk paper in his hands, and he switched his weight from one leg to another. What have you got there? She asked and wondered what she might have ordered and then forgotten. Food was covered so it couldn't be spices. They had the ribbons for the award ceremony and the new uniforms had arrived just yesterday, and the parcel was much too small anyway, and Tsubaki-senpai was taking care of everything related to the finishing fireworks. I hope you like it. Let's eat together tomorrow, Adate said, thrust the parcel to her hands and disappeared from the place quickly, befitting the winner of the Todoroki Shrine race. Miwa raised an eyebrow and opened the rustling paper carefully. Inside was a birabira, a long hair pin with metal strips attached by rings to the body of the pin. They tinkled pleasantly in the wind, and Miwa could only think, oh shit. Any ideas on how to let a guy down nicely? She asked Yuriko. Adate was a valuable member of their group, teaching them self-defense, and Miwa was sure his connections with the Wasabi family could be worth a lot later. She didn't want to estrange him, but saying no wasn't something she had done a lot before, and she was certain she could only come across as crude. She couldn't afford crude. Naruto-kun trusted her to handle his business. Miwa dear, I know you are head over heels for Naruto-kun, but have you at any point asked him about his age?" Yuriko asked, and her voice was at once sympathetic and slightly amused. Ting-a-ling-a-ling went the birabira, the noise of it filling the sky as Miwa's entire life came to a halt. She hadn't asked. But Naruto-kun was a shinobi, surely that earned him at least a few age points to go with the years. "How old is he?" she asked. It wasn't like she was that old either, just 16. 15, no trouble, and 14 would be kind of problematic now, but one more year and the difference would seem smaller already. Ting-a-ling-a-ling went the birabira. 13. "You didn't think I decided to forego the race for his heart because I don't like orange, did you?" Her words were kind and kind of self-deprecating. Every word was clearly understandable and the sentence even made sense grammatically, but the whole of it, it was madness. Just 13. Naruto-kun had taken out whole Yakuza family, taken out Seihara at the peak of his power and saved them all, had fought against that Kirijounen, which was the highest ninja rank aside from Cage if she had understood it right, and he was just 13. 13. Okay, so he was bit on the short side, but 13. This was like finding out the great Kami Izanagi was still in his diapers when he created the world. 13. Why are all the good ones taken, gay or 13? Miwa moaned to the high heavens and then winced when every head within hearing distance turned towards her. There really isn't any way to make that sound a little less perverted, is there? She whispered over the sound of the wind and the sound of her heart breaking a little. It was a lovely ornament, really, and he didn't want to offend Adate, but there was no way she could ever wear it now. Ting-a-ling-a-ling. 038. Touch Naruto loved festivals. New Year's Festival, Tanabata, the Konoha Cherry Blossom Festival, Hanami and the Lantern Floating Festival, he loved them all. Even the Kyuubi's demise anniversary was dear to him now that he knew a bit more about why people were so much more horrid to him than normal that night. Today all Makimura would bear witness to the ultimate test of public-minded fitness, the Makimura Police versus the Great Naruto Fire Brigade, Sports Day. The opening of the Fire Heart Inn and the Peaceful Rest Inn just made it that much better. Taiki and Konatsu-chan had protested that Peaceful Rest sounded like a cemetery's name, but they had been voted to just be morbid like that. Kiri influence and all, it hadn't been easy to arrange, either. It was enough to speak with the police chief, after that he had to G to the mayor. The mayor had then promptly entered Konatsu and Kaede's begging count, and the Makimura Municipal Council had raised the count to 4 after he was sent there. Turns out that giving every police a free day the same day is a bad idea, and when people think you are involved in organized crime, no one trusts your cage bunshine to uphold the law. Don't worry, we barely approach organized on a good day, Konatsu had snickered and Kaede had thwacked her over the head. It hadn't helped at all. But now the day had come at long last. Tourists were strolling among the ramen stands and the confection stands, buying things and commenting how exotic it was that firefighting was a women's job here. Naruto's eyes picked Yamamoto from the crowd and he made his way to the man. Yamamoto was looking around wild-eyed and he jumped when Naruto shouted his greeting and grabbed his arm. When Naruto frowned, he grimaced, and that wasn't the purpose at all, but Naruto liked touching people. He was the kinetic type, like Iruka-sensei had called him once. He learned best with his body rather than by reading or listening. He liked hugging people and clinging onto them. He liked the friendly shoves he got from his sparring partners after the spar and thwacks to the head from Sakura-chan. Praise always sounded the best when it was accompanied by a hand ruffling his hair too. Naruto knew it could be scary when people you thought were evil touched you. Kakashi-sensei had called it psychological warfare. But he didn't really have experience about that since his enemies had never been the touchy-feely type and it was easy to forget. "Come watch the kunai throwing competition," he asked and kept his hold, dragging the man after him. This was all about making friends, so he should just act all natural. The girls won the first competition, courtesy of finding out about it a week before the fact and Tsubaki-chan's instruction. Their accuracy wasn't the greatest even at the short range, but they consistently hit the target, and more importantly, hit it with the blade of the kunai. The men in police uniforms hit it with the handle as often as with the blade, and the hit didn't count if the kunai didn't stay. It was a landslide victory, and the spectators, all tourists and his local child following, cheered as the girls jumped at each other's necks. They looked great in their new uniforms, a high-collared coat with tight, button sleeves and pants with the ankles bandaged like a ninja's. "Huh, I guess you don't throw kunai here, this not being a hidden village?" he asked the police guy, deciding to be a cool and gracious winner. "You should, you can do cool things with them, and senbon. I met this really strong ninja called Haku, he, or she, it was kind of ambiguous, he dressed like a girl, but said she was a he, had this really strong ice bloodline and he could throw senbon so it stopped Sasuke's heart and lungs and suppressed his chakra, but still didn't really kill him for good. Boy, I was scared he was dead for a while and I kinda lost it." This was when Naruto turned his face from the cheering, laughing girls to the man he was talking to, and he noticed that Yamamoto's face had gone decidedly ashen. Oops, he had forgotten Tsubaki-chan's golden rule of getting along with civilians: never talk shop. Ever. "But I didn't kill him. I mean, Haku did die, but he changed his mind in the middle of it, so I didn't do it. And I'm not helping myself, am I?" Naruto drooped. Kakashi-sensei had always told him to stop his rambling 2 sentences sooner. Now he had really messed this one up, but maybe if he looked pitiful enough the police chief would decide he wasn't all that scary after all. No one ever took him seriously when he made puppy dog eyes at them. Yamamoto was opening and closing his mouth like a fish on dry land, but couldn't seem to say anything. Naruto wanted to pat his hand comfortingly, but decided sadly that maybe their friendship hadn't reached that level yet. 039. Taste the Sports Day was, as far as Naruto was concerned, pretty successful. The girls were getting along with the policeman, even if one of them punched this long-nosed guy to the stomach for calling her a pretty little kitty cat. Yamamoto protested that wasn't getting along, looking really worried doing so, and Naruto pointed out she didn't kick him to the nuts, so yes, it was. The policeman won the race and the fire brigade won the fireman carry race, the police won the swimming competition and the long jump, and the firefighters the obstacle course. The score was even before the last competition of the day. After the obstacle course ribbons have been awarded follows the last competition of the day, Miwa announced through a megaphone. A wheelbarrow race. She twirled around on the stage that she had ordered constructed for announcing purpose. Naruto could see she was having a ball and was happy since she had seemed really sad that morning for some reason. Yamamoto made a funny choking noise and gave Naruto a look. "Hi, Taiki. There are no real wheelbarrows involved in this one," Naruto explained to the man who seemed to be searching for them. He had intended to make the last competition something really exiting, but first Hiro-kun had made puppy eyes at Mariko-chan and then Mariko-chan had made puppy eyes at Naruto, and he couldn't deal with puppy eyes as well as he could deliver. His mind always short-circuited at the first signs of sad, watery eyes, and then he'd begin to babble. That usually made the situation worse instead of better because the words weren't going through proper vetting and he wasn't all that tactful even under the best conditions. This was why he had quickly surrendered and agreed that yes, a wheelbarrow race was a great idea. The participants octas wheelbarrows. "Well, half of them anyway," he explained. "How they act like a wheelbarrow?" Taiki asked, looking less than impressed. Act as an inanimate object? Maybe playing as a child went against the Kiri ninja way or something. So Naruto started to explain while the contestants arrived to the starting point. The policeman looked very red and embarrassed, the girls laughed. Someone was watching this through Naruto's eyes. Kyuubi sometimes took interest in the going-ons around Naruto. This had become much more obvious after the Four Tails fiasco that he still didn't want to talk about because he had almost killed Jiraiya-sensei. There didn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to why Kyuubi would watch this thing happen and not the other, but Naruto could feel something turning lazily within. Miwa-chan cracked the cymbals and after that everything happened quickly. Two of the police teams collided with each other before taking whole 10 steps and suddenly there was a groaning pile of 4 where it was hard to say which arm and leg belonged to whom. Naruto could have sworn he heard laughter, only not with his ears. I guess Kyuubi likes slapstick comedy. Who would have thought? He mused. Then again, anything that involved people getting hurt even a little was probably part of his portfolio. What? It was Taiki. His eyes were round and disbelieving. Kyuubi. You know, I'm a Jinchuriki and it just thought that was funny, he explained. He really didn't want to. Now Yamamoto would be even more scared, but he had learned at young age that lying about things just made things worse in the long run. If you are good it can get you out of trouble you wouldn't have gotten in the first place if you were a little more upstanding, Iruka-sensei had said after he had told that Akamaru had eaten his homework. Akamaru had been very insulted and Naruto had apologized to him because Akamaru, a real puppy, was the uncrowned king of the sad puppy look. Yamamoto's expression didn't change a bit, but Taiki was a whole another thing. You? A Jinchuriki? He asked, and Naruto started to explain that he was sane and stable and completely non-homicidal, honest, but then Taiki already sat down right there on the ground, his face pale, and started sputtering something about a Jinchuriki cult and him being a cult leader. So you aren't a crime organization, but a cult? Yamamoto asked, his face the picture of relief universal to those who have just learned they can push a problem off to someone else to solve. Naruto could see he was kind of getting what he wanted, but not really at all. Victory was supposed to taste sweet, but even as the fire brigade took the victory of the last race and the whole competition this tasted like ashes. Because. Not our department. As long as you don't break the laws, you can be as cultish as you want, Yamamoto promised. We are a cult? Why doesn't anyone tell me these things? One of the in-girls asked from behind them, this time making Naruto jump. Riku was the oldest of them, easily over 30 years, a woman. And also really weird. It must have been all those years with the Yakuza. When is our next secret meeting? What deity are we praying to? Some sort of demon? What did Taiki-san say about you being a living saint? She fired away. Kyuubi, Naruto could tell, was laughing its furry ass off. This was the taste of ashes, going from being Yakuza to being a cultist. He had to make a report of this eventually and then Sakura-chan would murder him, if Iruka-sensei didn't beat her to it. I so did not need this sort of reputation. 040. Site Tsubaki was there to see when the first of Naruto's fire brigade members managed her first water jutsu. It was the day after the sports day and the girls could be seen toting their trophy ribbons proudly, gold and white flagrant against their practice clothes, the worst rags they owned that they didn't mind getting wet, sweaty, dirty and torn. There was a spring to their steps Tsubaki hadn't seen before and she realized with a start that winning those competitions against much bigger men must have also won these women back something very precious, their self-respect. She had at that point learned 5 new B-class and 3 A-class jutsu, given several taijutsu lessons to a date and had some of the best spars of her life ever with Taiki and she had reached the conclusion that this trip had already made it to the top 3 of good decisions in her life. Second place. The uncontested number 1 was becoming kunoichi back in the mists of her prepubescent past. She had also helped the girls with kunai throwing and some basic chakra molding exercises that Konatsu and Kaede seemed to have little patience for. Being able to do and teach were 2 different things and Tsubaki found herself wondering if she might be trusted enough to take a Jinan team anytime soon after the Mizuki fiasco. Now that relationship had made the number 1 bad, not good, absolutely terrible decision of her life. It was true that the Kiri duo had done much more for the students, as well as a date who had made them run in the sand to grow their stamina and chakra stores. Even then she was proud as a mother hen with her new chicks when one of the girls spat a water bullet from her mouth. It was a rare gray day with wet clouds hanging low over the coast and the air was practically alight with the tension of a storm that hadn't quite broken out yet, the wind blowing from the sea in fast, unpredictable torrents. Maybe the moist, thick air that gave the jutsu that last push it needed or maybe it was the self-confidence boost that did it. Chakra was half spiritual energy after all. It was there for those to see who would, how there was so much more to them now. If happiness was light, the whole Makimura would have been lit up like a bonfire. Michika was a lovely girl to look at age 17 practically a woman already with big doe eyes, elegant nose and a kendo back, though in her case calling it a dancer's back might be more accurate. Yet even she didn't manage to look very becoming with her brown practice rags clinging to her skin with sweat and her hair plastered against her skull, her face red with exertion. But when the first bullet, a bit on the small side but still very cohesive and resilient, flew from her mouth for good 10 meters and hit an old, rusted through mooring pole and cleanly snapping it in half, it was a sight to see. Her silly, joyful grin illuminated the whole beach. Wonderful, Michika, Tsubaki shouted and applauded. The rest of the girls joined her and Michika flushed even redder, now out of pleasure. And soon the rest of them practically doubled their effort, encouraged by the success of their friends. The sight of them, tongue peeking between lips and eyes crossing from concentration here and there, it warmed her heart. As a jounin she was used to much less pleasant and considerably bloodier sights when she gazed upon the results of her efforts. That was it, she had decided. She was going to become a teacher even if it took her a decade to get approved. Yet one more thing this trip had earned her and she was grateful. 041. Shapes. Naruto knew something about love, it could take many shapes. Sometimes it was okay if you taunted a person if you didn't let anyone else do so. Some people shook their heads and wondered about why Naruto was so stupid about Sasuke, but Sasuke was his friend, despite of being an utter and total bastard about it at times. He called Naruto dead last, but there had been that one time after they became Jonin when Kiba did the same and Sasuke punched him. Aside from Iruka-sensei, it was the first time someone shed blood for Naruto, that he was there to see. Kiba's nose bled quite a lot. That was friends with a total bastard kind of love. He made Naruto's nose bleed too later that day, but it was completely unrelated, so it was okay. Sometimes love took the shape of following after another person when they were being stupid just so that you could pick them up later when they fell. Shizune sure loved Tsunade Bakken a lot to go along with her all those years. Sometimes love was being at someone's side even at their worst time and making it all better. Iruka taught this to Naruto and Naruto honored the lesson by giving the same to Gaara, with some beating added, but that was because it was Naruto and it was Gaara. Sometimes love was knowing when to be hard and when to be sympathetic like Kakashi-sensei did. Sakura-chan had her own brand of tough love too, while Tucci and Ayame liked to feed him. And sometimes love was crazy-shaped and insisted that founding a cult was a great idea. So you have the world's strongest demon sealed into you? Riku Bakken asked him. And it can't get away? Yeah, and no way it can get away. Yondaime was the greatest seal master in the history of ever, Naruto protested. He had always admired Yondaime the same as everyone else, and while his regard had suffered a momentary lapse when he found out just why practically everyone hated him so, well, it was still better than Kyuubi killing everyone, right? At least now they were alive enough to hate him and Naruto could win their acknowledgement one day. It would be tough going, but hey, he was a hero. Iruka-sensei said so, that he was a hero for protecting everyone from Kyuubi, and Iruka-sensei calling him hero was worth anything, period. Naruto never put it in words even in his own head, but sometimes love took the shape of undeserved forgiveness because the reason you were hated was also the reason someone gave you that love. The safe house wasn't as much that these days as it was headquarters for Operation Whatever. Everybody seemed to think that Naruto had some great master plan, but the truth was that he just did the right thing and then other things happened that needed him to do something. The house was so full at every hour of the day that it was surprising when only Riku, Miwa and Tsubaki were there with him. And you want world peace? Miwa-chan asked coyly. She had been kind of down lately, but now she was teasing him so everything was probably alright again. Of course. Isn't that, like, a requirement for not being a dick? Naruto hunched his shoulders, half expecting being hit for saying dick, but apparently Tsubaki-chan thought that if you were adult enough for Hittite you were adult enough to swear. I guess. Worldly world is full of dicks then, she managed today even though her voice hitched. Naruto was certain that she was laughing her ass off inside. I think you fill the minimum requirements for a saint, then, the first and last line of defense against the forces of darkness and world peace. I'm joining, Riku Bakken declared with magnanimous air. Naruto choked on his own spit. I'm a shinobi. Shinobi can't be saints. He protested, thinking about Sakura-chan. She was so pretty when she was riled that Naruto felt guilty pleasure annoying her. It always made her eyes glitter like green lightning or sharp green glass shards, so very prettily. But he was sure he didn't want to annoy her this much. Then what about Rikudo-senin? Isn't he a saint as well as a shinobi? He said that war does not determine who is right, only who is left, and not in the political sense, I would bet, Miwa-chan pointed out. Naruto chewed on his lower lip. He had been mocked a lot and he usually knew when that happened. He could also usually tell when someone was honest, and this whole cult thing was a bit of both. On one hand they were jerking his chain, but on the other hand they had looked really impressed when he told them about QB and showed them the seal, and he wasn't used to people being impressed by that unless they were sealing nuts or something. They had looked at him like he just defeated a whole army by himself or turned rocks into gold or something. Well, I would rather be a cultist than a criminal, Riku Bakken said primly. Besides, real ninja believe in world peace and eternal friendship through superior firepower, so that bit is alright. I can get behind it now. Tsubaki-chan wasn't laughing on the inside, she was laughing out loud. It should be said that Riku's only contact with ninja had been through Naruto. But maybe she wasn't so wrong if real was used as a synonym for admirable. Optimism was good for the soul after all. 042. Triangle Morino. A date was involved in a love triangle. It wouldn't have been quite so embarrassing or depressing if his rival wasn't a 13-year-old boy with a crush on his equally 13-year-old teammate, and no idea Miwa-chan ever gave him a second glance. She had hounded his steps like a particularly well-trained dog, and if she hadn't been so obviously smitten, stupid people could have gotten really wrong impression of her character. Do you think yoga would be a good idea? Should we chant? She asked, kicking the leg of the counter she was sitting behind and scribbling on a page torn off from her account book. You realize that Naruto doesn't want a cult, right? It asked back, even though the image of Naruto turning beet red when a bunch of girls started chanting under his window was pretty damn amusing. But isn't it just right that someone acknowledge the service he is doing for the world? Miwa-chan asked, and scritch went her pencil, and while she talked to him she didn't even look up. She wasn't even wearing the bira he had given her. What you think of these? Which one is better? She pushed the paper to a date who turned it around. There were two. Mantra, he thought, or maybe prayers? Apparently there was a difference between a mantra and a normal prayer, but damned if he knew what it was. Ninja weren't all that religious even one good day, because pretty much every religion, with the exception of the Jashinism, which was for utter creeps only, had orders like thou shalt not kill, and who wanted to be born as a cockroach in their next life. Better not to believe in the whole business at all. And after he left Konoha he became a merchant, and they weren't precisely the most devout people ever either, because money-making was bad for the soul too. But these two prayer things looked like something that was indeed chantable. We meditate on the worshipable power and glory of him who protects the world from the terrible Kyubi no Yoko and who directs our understanding, and the one who sealed the beast into his belly. We meditate on the glory of the being who protects the world from the terrible Kyubi no Yoko and who shall lead us all to light of understanding, and the one who sealed the beast into his belly. I think the second one is better, Idate managed to utter. Miwa-chan looked entirely serious as she accepted the paperback and read through the both options with critical eye. The bell over the door to the shop rang, and Miwa-chan slipped the paperback between the pages of the account book, standing to serve the family who had walked in. All were very obviously tourists in their straw hats and yukata with Makimura sites printed on the fabric. This was the last week they would need to man the store at all, as someone named Sakuya had decided that Matsuzaki-san was in good enough health to show his face and face the music. Idate was kind of sad. He was going to miss these peaceful afternoons in the shop with Miwa-chan. Miwa-chan, who was apparently sublimating her previously romantic feelings into religious fervor. He would better have some hand in forming the Narutoism, as the cult was for now tentatively called, if only to make sure it didn't require anyone to be celibate. Triumphing over a 13-year-old boy in a battle for a fair maiden's heart only on a technicality was kind of sad, but if he lost because Miwa-chan decided to become a nun for the said boy, he was going to murder somebody. 043. Square Naruto had sadly concluded that he was going to get blamed for everything, even though everything he had done had made perfect sense. Shikamaru had once said that two wrongs did make right. It maybe wasn't morally sound, but it made mathematical sense. Along the same vein, Naruto had decided that two rights made wrong, like this cult ballyhoo people were getting into, proved. There was no justice in the world. This was only proved further when there was a light knock on the door late in the night of his 28th day in the peaceful, what a joke, town of Makimura. Everybody was already sleeping, and Naruto was the one to wake up first and trot to the door barefooted. He rubbed his eyes sleepily as he opened it. Yakashi Kabuto was standing on the porch, smiling like a paper doll. Good night, Naruto-sama. I'm sorry to bother you this late, but I thought it wise to not bring my luggage through the town in broad daylight. He greeted Naruto softly, like nothing ever happened at all. The moon was half-circle above them, and his hair shone in its light silver and white like a ghost. For a few precious seconds Naruto just stood still as his mind tried to process what his eyes, ears and nose were telling him. It looked like Kabuto, it had the soft tones of his voice and his smell, a tang of something sharp and chemical and a hint of blood underneath, but Kabuto was. Naruto's hands were forming Rasengan before his conscious mind caught up with them, but when it did, it approved. The light of it lit the porch and Naruto could hear several curses inside the house, knew that his chakra, tinged with Kyuubi's Redand pain, had awakened the whole house now. Good. Who you came for now? He shouted and struck. Kabuto leapt back with eerie grace, like quicksilver or a wisp of mist, and what was meant to hit his chest squarely hit the dirt of the yard instead, making a new crater to go along with the previous ones. Dust darkened the glow of the town's lights. I came for you, Naruto-sama. I am the kind of person who keeps his promises, after all, and I made one for you, Kabuto said, his voice not alarmed in the least. It was pleasant if anything, like he was chatting of weather. Please do not try to kill me yet. I haven't been of any use to you at all. Let me talk first, you can always kill me later. That stopped Naruto where he stood for several reasons. The chakra he had gathered for another Rasengan wavered like a candle's light in wind and died, leaving their faces in shadows again. Something burned and clawed inside him, screamed how he had taken Sasuke team and left and Hokage Gigi was dead and it was his fault kill him, the red haze of Kyuubi falling over his eyes, but he still wasn't striking. Time stretched like bubblegum, there was still time even though everyone inside the house was running already. You can always kill me later? Oh, not Kabuto too. What was wrong with people that they said such things? Besides going to Orochimaru, of course. That was always a bad idea, Yakashi Kabuto, missing Nin of Konoha. Tsubaki-chan's voice was slick like the oil used to polish swords and her blade made a thin noise as she slid it from its sheath. Naruto knew even without turning that Taiki was there too and he was dangerous, and Konatsu and Kaede too. It was like weight strapped to his back, their killing intent. He raised his hand. Wait. It was hard to think over the roaring of Kyuubi in his ears, but he needed to keep his head now. Maybe there was something to this whole cult leader thing after all because everyone waited just because he told them so, even though he was sure that Taiki was plain mortified by the whole thing and Tsubaki-chan was amused. Kabuto smiled to him happily and that happiness wasn't like proper happiness at all. Naruto didn't have the vocabulary to describe it, but it kind of made him hurt. But still. You took Sasuke? He accused. Kabuto had helped at it in any case. Enabled the whole thing. I have brought him back to you, Kabuto stated and gestured with his hand towards the middle of the yard. There was the shape of a barrel, like one shadow amongst many. Something was draped around it, like charms in a temple. He didn't come peacefully, Naruto laughed. It was a stupid thing to do and everything was not okay at all, but the thought of Sasuke's indignant face when he was stuffed into the barrel against his wishes, it just made something inside Naruto explode in bubbly giggles. And maybe things would be alright in the end after all. Things needed to be fair and square. Kabuto had helped to take Sasuke away, but he had brought Sasuke back. Hokage Gigi was dead now, but it had been Orochimaru who had killed him. Will you help me kill Orochimaru? He asked. Kabuto had been his friend. He had hurt Naruto, true, but if he started holding hat against people, well. He wanted Kabuto back. Fair and square. Let's talk. 044. Circle. There was a barrel in the middle of the living room and 6 ninja gathered around a table. The tea was hot and just bitter enough for Kabuto. Ono Tsubaki, one-time lover of the traitor Mizuki if Kabuto remembered right, was giving him glares that could almost set things to fire without the help of jutsu, but she also kept looking at the barrel. Doihara Taiki looked like he had a clue what this was about, the 2 Kiri children didn't. But Kabuto only had eyes for one person. Is this one of those you didn't ask things? Naruto-sama asked him. Yes, Kabuto answered unashamed and sipped his tea. It wasn't drugged, but he didn't hold that against Ono and Doihara. His arrival was certain to be a shock. He was sure they were usually savvier. What you meant, I can kill you later. You don't want to die, do you? Why you say such things? Naruto-sama asked and Kabuto blinked, off his guard. He had expected to be asked why, but not this why. Why he would die so easily. Why not? What is the point of living if I'm no one? If you don't want me, who I am? He returned the questions with his own. His pulse had elevated without his permission. Normally the control his medical techniques allowed him over his body was greater, but now he felt it slipping gently away under the suspicious, angry blue eyes. He couldn't even remember when he had been afraid of death, but this was a sensation he could remember, if only vaguely. He had been a child, in Nono's care, and he had been promised candy if he did well at test. He had passed, but not with the best marks, not even the third best. Now things had come to a full circle and he was waiting with bated breath again, but this time the stakes were much higher than a piece of candy. Was fourth best good enough for Naruto-sama? He would die if necessary, but he didn't want to be disowned. You are Kabuto. You are good at keeping secrets and too literal and kind of an idiot and a total jerk, but don't worry, it's not like I'm not used to that. Approval, acknowledgement, invitation. Naruto-sama stood up and walked to the barrel where his teammate slumbered. His face flickered like a mirage. Some concealed their feelings with a face like porcelain mask, but Naruto showed too much to interpret, flooding senses instead of denying them. A little sadness, a lot of determination and a mess of contradictions. Okay, so we wake Sasuke up tomorrow and write to Tsunade Bakken we have got him and you are going to tell everything you know about Orochimaru. But first tell me what the hell messed you up like that. It isn't that hard to answer, right? Naruto-sama demanded and turned around, his eyes charged like lightning, like the Chidori his teammate had displayed. Naruto-kun, who can trust the color of a chameleon? This isn't sensible, we must detain him, Ono chided Naruto-sama gently, but he twitched, almost jumped. The silence of the three Kiri ninja could have been cut with a kunai, the silence of the night oppressing and the silence of the barrel even more so. Kabuto didn't understand much of feelings, but he had learned to recognize them and that barrel was filled with what-ifs and maybes. The ninja lizard. Your colors, Naruto-sama muttered and his hand hovered over Kabuto's. Kabuto wanted Naruto-sama to touch him, but he couldn't ask for it, it wasn't his place. The circle made him, the circle broke him and it could make him anew and it would never stop turning. He owed Naruto-sama an answer. You can bind me and seal my chakra if you wish. Shimura Danzo is the one who did this to me. He answered to both of them. Ono paled and her hands became fists, but Naruto-sama's face only displayed clear, unconflicted anger. The hand touched his. 045. Moon where the energy flow begins is in the body of the material world. It moves freely through the body, if allowed, and expresses itself at times beyond the five senses. The human is a moon that reflects the sun that is the divinity, a clear mirror, yet incomplete, reversed, flawed. When one learns to take the sensations of the flesh to the sixth sense one can experience divine ecstasy. Sai walked down the street as the sun only begun to rise over the horizon. It was easy to read a book while walking so early when other senses didn't need to be extended to avoid colliding with other people. He wasn't quite certain about the book he had chosen to learn how to act like a human being. On one hand, he often felt like a mirror, or a moon if one wished to use grand, wistful metaphors, merely reflecting what he saw others experience. On the other hand, he had never thought that achieving orgasm was so necessary to mental balance. If spiritual balance and soul were considered equivalent to mental balance, that was. It appeared to be a somewhat different thing, but the book lacked exact descriptions. Yet to become a moon, a mirror, was a useful thing for an infiltrator, and while he hadn't participated in the techniques described due to his young age and undeveloped body, he tried to embrace the ideal. To reflect what his targets were, what they wanted to see in others rather than what he really was. The shape of the moon was best recognized not in its whole self and not even in half, but as a crescent, a sliver. Surely his incomplete self could be recognized as true human as well if he only integrated the idea sufficiently. All his good intentions came to naught. When he arrived to the door of the safe house, a loud crash could be heard from the inside. Fearing Uzumaki was under assault, he broke in to meet a chaotic scene. The missing nin Uchiha Sasuke was lying on the floor, snarling at the Jinchuriki who was kneeling on his chest and pinning his arms to the floor. A table broken in half had been kicked around as had a barrel, and behind it stood a long-nosed man in blue garb, obviously armed. Jounen Ono sat by a wall with her hand on her sword's handle, her eyes sharp and hard as they turned towards Sai. And above this whole scene stood Yakashi Kabuto, a traitor to the root, and Danzo-sama, servant of Orochimaru. The Uchiha was under control and the smaller threat anyway, so Sai attacked Yakashi on the spot. 046. Star Uchiha Sasuke had been a pretty big deal ever since the Uchiha massacre. The last Uchiha, the star pupil at the academy everybody expected big things from, the star pupil of Hatake Kakashi, or so it had seemed at first. But while he couldn't complain about the time the man put to teaching him, Naruto just kept catching up with him, inch by painstaking inch. And then there had been Gaara. The last time Sasuke had been so afraid had been that night, that terrible night when the brother he had always loved and admired stood above his parents' still warm bodies, his swords red and wet, dripping on the floorboards like a rain cloud. His mother had been quiet, but she sang in his memories, "It's raining, it's pouring. The old man is snoring." He could never forgive Gaara for making him feel that helpless again. Sometimes, in his dreams, there was no difference between the red moon and the red sand, and he could hear his mother singing, but she was so far away. He went to bed and bumped his head and couldn't get up in the morning. Such morbid songs for the once strong Uchiha, taken down by their own. The truth was that being a star pupil in the academy just meant that Sasuke was a big fish in a little pond, and being dropped into the bigger pond that was the whole of Konohagakure no Sato was a shock to his system he never quite recovered from. There had to be some fault in Konoha for making him weak, for he couldn't stand the thought that there might be a fault in him. He had sworn to leave that stumbling self behind him with the rest of Konoha, moved his team picture from one shelf to another, the one where he kept the pictures of his dead, and in a twisted sort of way the decision to kill his heart had worked. He had been ready to pay the price. To say that he was less than pleased when he realized his former teammate had managed to infect one of his new teachers with the friendship nonsense would be an understatement. He was, in fact, livid beyond measure, and that he was stuffed into a barrel again, this time against his will, did nothing to help. Inside he was more asleep than awake, only distantly aware that the barrel was moving. The grogginess persisted when the lid was finally pried open and strong arms dragged him out and pulled him into a basket hold. The sudden light stung, and everything was blurry in his watering eyes. His ears were ringing. He was helpless. Or was the hold a hug? And he could swear he saw a hint of those birthmarks under the floppy, obnoxiously yellow hair. Sasuke. You are back. Naruto. I will kill you. Sasuke struggled against his captor's hold and glared at Yakashi, that traitor. Yakashi looked distinctly pleased with himself, but then, he always did. That smug snake. I'm not going to let you hold me back, he snarled at Naruto and twisted to get one hand free, but the orange-clad idiot's arms were like bands of steel. Konoha only made me weak, like you. Gods, it's contagious, somebody laughed in the background and that made the noise in his head louder, shriller. His curse mark was burning like a brand freshly plucked from a fire. Now you're just being stupid. Orochimaru became strong in Konoha. Kabuto became strong in Konoha. Your brother became strong in Konoha. Just stop being stupid and come back home. It's not like you're really a missing nin or anything, Naruto insisted. Sasuke latched onto that last part, a clear sign that Naruto didn't know what he was talking about. And even though Itachi and Orochimaru were both Konoha born and Konoha trained, it was easy to ignore in the light of that one glaring falsehood. What you mean, I'm not really a missing nin? I tried to kill you, remember? By what Kakashi-sensei said, that would make me lower than trash, he reminded his former teammate, finally managing to work his arm into a position he could use to break the basket hold. And of course that dumb Naruto had to destroy all his effort by thrusting him arm's length away, making the maneuver unnecessary. Didn't he even know how to keep someone captive? Stop being so hard on yourself. Self-esteem is for everyone, you know? And I'm totally over that almost killing thing, so don't worry, Naruto said breezily. What do you mean, over it? You can't just be over it. That had been one of Sasuke's worst moments, the moment when he almost took the life of someone who was, sort of, his friend. And he hadn't even managed to do it in the end, making the whole thing a double failure, and if he wasn't over it, Naruto wasn't allowed to either, damn it. And there is nothing wrong with my self-esteem. You just called yourself trash, Naruto pointed out pleasantly. Behind his back an unknown girl covered her mouth with her hand, but not quickly enough to hide a smile. A boy by her side bit the ball of his thumb and Sasuke's already frayed temper snapped. He threw the annoyance against the table, which broke with a satisfying crash, but quickly as a snake, much quicker than he used to be, Naruto leapt back and pushed him flat on his back. I didn't say it. Kakashi said it, he shouted at the top of his lungs while Naruto just looked infuriatingly vague and worried. Yes you did. And Kakashi-sensei isn't even here. Did you hit your head when Kabuto stashed you in there? Naruto asked, and now the unknown boy was hanging from the girl's shoulder, his whole upper body shaking with silent laughter. Sasuke snarled wordlessly. This was when a boy wearing Konoha's Hittite crashed the scene and tried to kill Yakashi on the spot. 047. Heart when Naruto pressed a snapping, snarling Sasuke to the floor. He thought that this was the best day ever. He had gotten two of his best friends back in one fell stroke, and maybe Sasuke team wasn't yet fully on board with the idea, but Naruto was sure he could change Sasuke's mind. He was certain that his and Sakura-chan's worst failing the first go-round had been that they hadn't gotten enough words in edgewise quickly enough. This was the best day ever, and he was a bit afraid his heart would explode like a tag, just blam, and pieces of Naruto would be all over the place from sheer happiness. Then a strange Konoha shinobi crashed his party and attacked Kabuto. For a second Naruto was torn as he sat atop Sasuke, not daring to stand for fear that the jerk would just run away again, afraid that Kabuto was about to get hurt. Tsubaki-chan stood like she had been turned to stone. Taiki and Konatsu-chan and Kaede all shifted, touched the handle of a sword or a kunai or pushed their fingers together, ready to flash through the hand signs of this or the other jutsu, but no one did anything. No one except Kabuto, who moved so quickly Naruto only saw a blur, and the simple fire jutsu the stranger had used hit the wall instead. Somebody put the fire out, he shouted, and Konatsu-chan turned around and spat the water bullet with the ease of one who has used the jutsu again and again and again over the course of the last few days. The floor flooded instantly. Naruto was spared from most of it, thanks to his perch on top of Sasuke, but said duck butt was starting to resemble a wet puppy instead, in the space of a few heartbeats. "Let me up," Sasuke commanded him and pushed at his chest. It wasn't hard enough to move him, but maybe making Sasuke lie in what amounted to a puddle was a bit mean? Nah. What should I do with him, Naruto-sama? Kabuto asked as he dodged yet another strike. The words made the shinobi to look at Naruto sharply before jumping towards him, but now Kabuto struck. Again there was a blur, but now it ended with a meaty thump and a pained groan, then splash when the pale boy hit the floor, but stood up immediately. "Please, Shinobi-san, this isn't what it looks like. Yakashi Kabuto has defected from Orochimaru and offered us the Uchiha and information." Tsubaki-chan spoke quickly and took a half step closer to the boy, making a placating-looking gesture with her hands. The boy only frowned as he let his eyes move from Tsubaki-chan to Kabuto, then to Naruto and Sasuke and eventually to the rest. No one made a move to attack him, only staring in a way that made Naruto grimace a bit from sympathy. That had to be uncomfortable. "Ono Tsubaki, suspected of working for Orochimaru," he said flatly and pulled a sketchbook from his bag, along with a brush dripping with ink. Just a few months ago Naruto would have thought that totally harmless, but these months with Jiraiya had taught him what seals could be good for. "Just don't kill him. Or terribly maim him," he shouted to Kabuto, adding that last bit because he had a feeling that Kabuto might need it. Then everything happened quickly. Everybody shouting leapt aside, giving the fight on the way a lot of room, now pulling their blades as well, but still not attacking. And Sasuke struck him quickly as a snake, sending him crashing on the floor. And something rose from the sketchbook, something black that he couldn't really see from the corner of his eye because he was looking at Sasuke team and climbing back to his feet. Kaede was closest to Sasuke now and he attacked with taijutsu. Sasuke blocked easily, but then Naruto was already coming at him. The curse markings climbed up Sasuke's neck and cheek like some disgusting skin disease. Sasuke struck towards his sternum in a way Naruto was sure was going to broke something and hurt like hell even with Kyuubi's help. Ribs breaking and puncturing the heart or lungs were only cool when you were the one doing it, and so he jumped and blocked. The pain shot up his arm, numbness at its heels, but he didn't think anything had broken. He then threw a punch that Sasuke didn't even deign to block, muttering sloppy under his breath as he dodged Kaede as well, aiming a kick towards the boy. The kick never connected. Kabuto was there so quickly Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin. Kabuto's hand glowed with sickly green light and one tap, just one tap lighter even than the Hyuga Tenketsu hits, was enough. Sasuke hit the floor like a ragdoll and Naruto noticed that Kabuto was carrying the stranger over his shoulder with ease. Now that he could really look, he noticed that the boy looked a lot like Sasuke. Kaede was leaning against the wall and clutching his chest over his heart, looking like he wanted to accuse Kabuto of almost causing him a heart attack. A bad day for heart health all around. "The situation is under control, Naruto-sama. I believe we should restrain at least one of them before they wake up to avoid a repetition of this," he suggested and set the stranger down. And so they did. Naruto felt kind of crummy tying up Sasuke, but since he was the one who had run away before, well, precedent and all. The first thing the Sasuke lookalike said when he woke up was, "Were you attempting to engage in a tantric sex ritual with Uchiha earlier?" In their first show of united purpose in 4 months, Naruto and Sasuke both tried to strangle him. Sasuke's attempt was really good, Naruto thought as Taiki pulled them away, considering that his hands had been tied behind him, not in front. Even Lee didn't have that sort of legwork. 048. Diamonds were the hardest known material in the world, only a diamond could scratch another diamond. Yet diamonds were born from carbon, soft and easily burned coal, useful in its own way, yet much inferior. Diamonds were born when carbon was placed under great pressure and heat in the heart of the earth, burned to last and shine. Only under the harshest conditions could shinobi reach their true potential, like coal. Sai was among the lucky few. Sai saw the green glow of a scalpel made of chakra and his world went dark. He knew enough of chakra scalpels that he was very surprised when he realized he had woken up. Someone had carried the tatami mats outside and dried the wooden floor the best they could, but the house still appeared a bit shabby and charred around the edges. He was even more surprised to realize that he was unrestrained, and that the Uchiha who was glaring at him near a wooden crate that had replaced the broken table had his hands tied. Yet Kabuto was free and he stood next to Uzumaki, though Ono stood behind him and had her hand on the handle of her sword. Sai was suffering from conflicting signals, which was never good when one was carrying a small armory's worth of knives. "Were you attempting to engage in a tantric sex ritual with Uchiha earlier?" he asked Uzumaki. Uzumaki's face turned bright red and he jumped at Sai with his fingers spread out like claws. An unknown long-nosed man in blue clothes caught Uzumaki by the back of his jumpsuit, but this didn't prevent the Uchiha from delivering a kick to his chest and attempting to strangle Sai with his legs. It wasn't a bad attempt, really, but a kick to the larynx would have been a much more effective way to end his life. Obviously Orochimaru's training had been subpar so far. It seems. You are the one he spread his legs for, an unknown girl sputtered, and now Uchiha turned towards her in the man's grip, his whole body language broadcasting barely restrained aggression that Sai attributed to the detrimental effect of the curse seal. But Uzumaki appeared to forget his burst of irrational rage, caused by Kyuubi, maybe? And snorted with the girl. So I'm Uzumaki Naruto, though I'm called Sato Naruto here, so you better use that name too, Uzumaki told him and extended his hand. These are Tsubaki-chan, she's my backup here and a really cool and strong jounin. Konatsu-chan and Kaede, they ran away from Kiri when their jerk-ass teachers told them to kill each other to graduate. They are a sister and a brother, you know. He's Taiki, he came after them, but we made him see the light so he stayed as well, and Kabuto used to be my friend and he came back to join my cult that I didn't ask for and didn't try to found. And Sasuke's still being stupid about things so he gets to be tied up. Uzumaki pointed at each and every person as he introduced them and thrust his hand out again. Sai stared at it and lifted his gaze to Uzumaki's face. You are supposed to take it, Uzumaki said with strangely lilting rhythm. Sai did as he was told and Uzumaki shook their entwined hands up and down a few times. Now you are supposed to tell me your name, the Jinchuriki continued his instructions. My name is Sai. Are these manners common amongst people or only those who belong in cults? He asked since Uzumaki seemed open to explaining the social convention he was following. It was very helpful of him, really. Are we sure this cult is a good idea on top of everything else? Ono asked, displaying exasperation. She was leaning against the wall with one hand now that Yakashi was taking a few steps to the side, away from Uzumaki yet towards Sai at the same time, and he found himself re-evaluating his initial assumptions concerning her loyalties. If she displayed aggression towards Orochimaru's underlings and protectiveness towards Uzumaki, did she remain faithful to Konoha? Or the as of yet unnamed cult? Or rather, as she didn't seem to have a high opinion of said cult, to Uzumaki personally? He had been ordered to eliminate Ono if she turned out to be a threat, but so far the evidence was self-conflicting. He needed more information to reach a conclusion. And Yakashi Kabuto was to be killed. He knew far too much to be allowed to live, but Sai was keenly aware after their brief fight, which he had only survived on Uzumaki's orders, that he wasn't a match in fair fight to the former Ado-nin. But there was more than one way to defeat an enemy. What is this cult? May I join it too? He asked. He had read an article about cult psychology and he was fairly certain that if he could get these people's trust as one of their own they would never expect betrayal of him. He was ready to go along with Uzumaki's manipulation for now, he had no problems being isolated from the civilian society. Besides, one of the major thresholds that needed to be crossed when initiating new members into a cult involved physical hardship. This could include sleep deprivation, chronic hunger, long hours of manual labor or other similar things. Sai figured that getting beaten in a fight should suffice. He was obviously prime cult material. Ah, maybe you will. I have seen eyes like yours before, Sai, Yakashi drawled. Sai looked into the man's dark eyes. Then he couldn't look away. He had once read that eyes were like water's cool surface underground, that it was romantic foolishness to try and seek the difference between an enemy and a lover within those depths. He knew that the expressions that were attributed to eyes were in fact formed by the muscles around the eyes and eyebrows. He had read this. I have seen eyes like yours before, Sai, too often in the mirror. Did you have a name before Danzo sent you here, or did you merely have a number? Who had to die so you had no one to define yourself by, nothing left but memories, a little less bitter every year. Kabuto's eyes were dark, but they seemed to hold a gravity seal that narrowed Sai's perception to those eyes and nothing else. Don't. He started, but realized he had no idea what he was pleading Yakashi not to do. He was certain that if Root's files of Uzumaki Naruto were even marginally true, the Jinchuriki wouldn't allow him to be tortured. May I be alone with him for a little while, Naruto-sama? We could share our experiences and life lessons under Danzo, Yakashi asked. Sai could see nothing but his eyes. Sai had been carefully conditioned to not feel fear, but now he wondered if the small niggling at the back of his mind meant that he was scared. Only a diamond could scratch another diamond, but here, Sai thought, might be a diamond harder than he was. 049. Club seeing Sasuke again after all these months was strange and Naruto wasn't quite sure what to think or feel. Anger, yes, there was some of that. Actually, there was a whole lot of it. What had that idiot been thinking, leaving him and Sakura-chan behind and running off to the snake freak, making Sakura-chan cry? Okay, he could see that Sasuke had wanted to be strong to beat Itachi and all, but true strength didn't come from a curse seal that twisted your body until creepy missing nin could possess you, and bye-bye to your vengeance then. Real strength was knowing that your friends gave you a reason to keep fighting and they were going to fight for you to help you reach your goals, even if the goal was a homicidal maniac missing nin. Even if Sasuke was complete idiot, he should have gotten this at least. So yeah, Naruto was angry. Sakura-chan had cried. But he was also giddy with relief. Sasuke was still Sasuke, still the one in charge of his own body, not just Orochimaru's new fashionable body. Sasuke was paler now, like he hadn't seen the sun for a good long time. His hair was a little longer, like he hadn't bothered to cut it. His sleeves were a little too short, like he hadn't bothered to get bigger clothes, and Naruto was kind of surprised that his quest for vengeance hadn't made him forgot to bathe. Okay, maybe that was a tiny overstatement, but Sasuke should have taken better care of himself. Still, he was Sasuke and no one else. Can I trust you to not run, or do I have to keep you tied up? He asked his errant teammate. He was pretty sure that Taiki and Kabuto could catch Sasuke before he left Makimura's borders anyway, but that didn't mean he wanted to bother them like that. He didn't want Sasuke to run. And he had to worry about Kabuto and Danzo and Sai and Orochimaru too. At least becoming Hokage should be a cakewalk after this kerfuffle. Was he the only person with a whole brain in the whole continent that he had to take care of everything? I can't become strong enough to beat Itachi and Konoha, Sasuke complained in a dark tone, and struggled against his ropes. Naruto was pretty sure that Sasuke knew it was futile too, and he was just being ornery like that. So he had an idiot, and a clue club to hit the idiot over the head with. He was good at hitting things at least. Look, you idiot, Itachi became strong enough to kill your clan in Konoha. Orochimaru became strong in Konoha and so did Kabuto. Okay, bad example since I'm gonna give that Danzo bastard is just desserts. And how? Of course Naruto had known that the world was full of evil people and they weren't always going to be on the other side, but Danzo had still costed him something, some belief in his fellow humans. He had cost Kabuto and apparently Sai as well a lot more, and he was going to collect that money's worth. Just wait, Danzo, the great Uzumaki Naruto was onto you. I've been in Konoha this whole time. Do you think I'm weak? He shouted. Okay, so he hadn't been in Konoha, technically speaking, but he had been a Konoha nin the whole time, so it still counted. I'm not an idiot, you moron, Sasuke snapped at him and his Sharingan swirled in a mess of red and black that was hard to track. You've been cheating this whole time. I know about QB. Just a month ago this would have made Naruto shout in anger, but now he just snorted and shook his head. He knew he was better than that now. Hey, Avenger-chan, which one of us agreed to be turned into a monster? And if you think QB helped any, have you seen my academy grades? He asked and took a deep breath. He kind of wanted to get mad, but he knew it wouldn't help any. Look, I'm going to go back to Konoha to ambush Danzo before he can figure out Kabuto's with us again, and Sai's gonna be too, and after that we'll go after Orochimaru before he figures it out. If you can live through that, you're going to be one kick-ass shinobi, and I bet they have a lot of cool jutsu scrolls too. And if Kabuto taught you in Auto, he can teach you in Konoha too. He bribed Sasuke. There was no way he was going to let Sasuke team die, but he didn't have to say that, now did he? It was pretty obvious as far as bribery went, but hey, the hammer hadn't worked, so why not try the club? And the Sharingan swirled slower now. Clue club for the win. 050. Spade Tsubaki had interviewed Yakashi Kabuto carefully, and thanks to Naruto's order to be honest, she believed she had indeed received truthful answers. They were certainly disturbing enough. If they were in fact concealing something more disturbing, she didn't believe the man should be able to even function anymore. My professional opinion, she said. Time to call a spade a spade. You are nuttier than a squirrel in a bag of crackers. I don't think I have ever heard that before, Kabuto said amusedly. Usually people just scream you are insane or you are crazy. Never for very long, though. His perfectly non-confrontational, matter-of-fact tone made Tsubaki grit her teeth. They were kneeling on the opposite sides of the table in the safe house, a pot of tea and 2 cups between them. The house was still a bit bare, but the new inhabitants had left their marks, Naruto in form of potted plants, Tsubaki in the form of new curtains, yellow in color and more importantly mesh enforced. It had been a bit of pain to explain to the weaver that yes, she wanted this roll of wire mesh sewed between 2 layers of fabric, but the security they offered had made the ordeal worth it. Konatsu had left fluffy blue slippers by the door, and she could see through the window to the garden where Miwa was hanging the laundry to dry. Now Sai had decided to add some charring to the walls and they needed to paper over it, but that was neither here nor there. It was a lively place, and pale, white-haired Kabuto looked even more ghost-like, lifeless, against this tapestry. At least he wasn't trying to look lively himself. Tsubaki could still remember how he used to smile. Maybe, just maybe this was an indicator that the whole mess wasn't about to blow up on their faces. It wasn't that he didn't have faith in Naruto-kun's ability to turn around a person's worldview and perceptions of reality. He practically challenged reality on a weekly basis, or maybe these had just been exceptionally busy weeks, and shouted from the rooftops that reality could try to crush him all it wanted. He wasn't going to be the one to walk away broken. He had decided to rid the town where he was supposed to lie low from of Yakuza because it was the right thing to do and gotten Tsubaki to go along with the mad plan. It had been so easy she was a bit embarrassed. He had decided that prostitution wasn't a complex social problem and a socio-economical issue that would just have to be tolerated. It was something easily fixable and people just like to make things more difficult than they were. 2 Kiri missing nin asking for shelter? Good, let's just convert the hunter nin as well. Tsubaki actually trusted Taiki quite a bit at this point. Maybe she needed to get her head checked, but she did. She could grudgingly swallow the idea of even Sasuke's kind of under duress reformation sometime in the future, but Kabuto? Granted, she didn't know him very well. He had been there on the peripherals of her awareness, the eternal Jinan who just couldn't get a promotion, right until he turned out to be Jounin level and working for a man who made it to the Leafs list of top 5 most dangerous traitors ever, order of entry undecided. And those hopefully honest answers had decided her opinion. Kabuto was brilliant, but it was the brilliance of a broken crystal. The prisms made rainbows in the sun, but they were still undeniably broken and only a fool would grab one without thick gloves. I don't trust you. I'm keeping an eye on you, and if you so much as twitch in a suspicious way before we can get you to the Hokage's office, or after, your head will part company from the rest of you. Kabuto tilted his head with a move like a snake's, his eyes raking up and down her body, not salacious, but assessing. To tell the truth, she wasn't entirely sure she could carry out that threat, but she was Jounin as well, and with Taiki by her side they should manage for sure. Letting me know you don't trust me wasn't a very good move, you know. In the completely hypothetical possibility that I'm playing you. Kabuto's voice was still pleasantly nondescript, like the topic of their conversation was weather or something else equally inane, but there was the most minuscule twitch at the left corner of his mouth. It was official now. The bastard was enjoying this. It isn't as though I could make you believe in my sudden faith in your sudden loyalty, so let me make my point in peace, okay? Tsubaki glared at the silver-haired man and sighed, letting her shoulders slump and picking up a brown paper bag from the floor. It was an uncomfortable situation, true, but it was one she would just have to deal with for now. Here, take these. It's a tradition now, and let's call a spade a spade. You are here and I can't be rid of you, so welcome to the group. She thrust the paper bag to Kabuto's arms and watched him check it carefully for concealed seals before opening it carefully. The face he made when he saw what was inside was most likely the first uncalculated expression she had gotten out of him. Pumpkin bread? He asked and raised one sardonic eyebrow, but it couldn't quite cover the startled curve of his eyes. Konatsu got a bit carried away. But you aren't getting the bombs, don't even bother asking. She didn't trust him, but she was willing to give Naruto his one chance to bring the man around. One chance to catch an even bigger monster, and who knew? Maybe even 2.051. Water was eternal, Taiki's first teacher had once told him, back in the academy. Boil it, it will rain back to earth sooner or later, freeze it and it will melt eventually, pour it on the ground and the plants will bring it back up to the air. To be a water ninja was to be mutable, adaptable, forever changing. He had forgotten this for a long time, as his whole village had. Maybe Kiri would be a better place if more people had listened to Yamadera-sensei. That he was being given a crash course in adaptability by a fire shinobi was irony that didn't escape him. You are just going to go to your Hokage with them in tow? Without even writing to her first? He asked with some difficulty. His gaze moved from Sai, who was staring at Kabuto in a manner that was both intrigued and vaguely horrified, to Kabuto, who was eating pumpkin bread and smiling like nothing was wrong in the world, to Sasuke, who was glaring at Naruto, but untied and not trying to escape. Of course. If I gave her advanced warning, that Danzo bastard would get warned as well. Don't worry, Tsunade Bakken is gonna do the right thing. She ran away from Konoha and gambled and drank all over the continent because she hated Konoha getting people killed. How you think she's going to take the news about Danzo? Naruto asked back and munched on his ramen happily. You call her Bakken behind her back? Konatsu asked with sardonic lilt in her voice, raising one eyebrow. Are you sure she will want to help you? I call her Bakken to her face. Don't you know how old she is? Naruto asked. All 3 former Kiri nin choked in their own spit as they imagined what would happen in Kiri if anyone, absolutely anyone, was to call the Mizukage names. If Naruto really could get away with that, and he was the most honest person Taiki had ever met, just maybe the mad idea of ambushing the Hokage with this issue would work out. Tsubaki's hand had frozen in mid-air, her chopsticks holding a few leeks like they were a shield between her and the crazy world. She was muttering under her breath and Taiki caught the words technically true, kind of, and what happened to the world I used to live in anyway. He echoed the sentiment fully. Are you going to return here? Miwa asked, wringing her hem in hands. She was sitting next to Naruto as usual, with an abandoned pad and a pencil on the crate table in front of her. Her eyes were almost feverish when she looked at the boy under her lashes. Sure, I have responsibilities here, and besides, Uro-sensei would have an apoplexy if he came here and I was missing, Naruto promised happily. Miwa brightened instantly, but Taiki remembered a certain gigantic sword-wielding toad, what that had to mean, and opened his mouth again even though he wasn't really surprised anymore. You called Jiraiya of the Sannin Uro-sensei behind his back? He asked. Irreverence, thy name is Naruto, he thought. Or possibly Uzumaki, he had heard stories about the clan prior to the destruction of Uzushio-Gakure. I call him Uro-sensei to his face. You know he writes the Icha Icha, right? Naruto cheerfully destroyed yet another piece of reality. Now Taiki couldn't work his jaw open anymore and he wondered if he was slipping into disbelieving catatonia of some sort. The name Jiraiya was on the covers and there were rumors of it being that Jiraiya, but there were always rumors. He hadn't really believed, had thought it propaganda by Konoha's enemies, because how could the legendary? I was his proofreader for a while and let me tell you, those books aren't all that great, Naruto confided in them. By the time Taiki's brain could process new information again, it was decided that Konatsu and Kaede would remain in Makimura and further train the fire brigade, what with being dead and not in need of shelter, assisted by a date. Miwa had promised to take responsibility for fixing the safe house up again and writing more mantras. Naruto had tried to escape his cult leader status by pointing out that Shodaime Hokage had fought Kyuubi first, which had only worked to encourage the girl, as now he needed to be added to the saints too. And Rikudo Sennin for a good measure, because what proper Jinchuriki cult didn't mention him? Adaptability, adaptability, adaptability. Hell, at this point he wouldn't have been surprised if Naruto's affinity happened to be water. Do you know what your elemental affinity is? He asked, giving the boy an assessing look. In Fire Country, fire was the most common, hence the name of the elemental country, but there were exceptions, among the most ironic their first Hokage who had been earth and water. It's wind, Naruto said happily, and now Taiki couldn't help but laugh. Of course, contrary to the very end. 052. Fire. The town of Makimura didn't really know darkness until the final hours before the dawn. The promenade was still alight with the lights of the restaurants and bars where the tourists partied long past the midnight, and the sounds of laughter and music filled the night. Couples walked the streets from one amusement to another or returning to their hotel, but none saw the shadow leaping quickly from one rooftop to another. Yakashi Kabuto had given his minder a slip and walked the night of Makimura. It was the last night before the group would leave for Konoha, and he was checking on Sasuke, as it wouldn't do for the Uchiha to get cold feet and attempt a last-minute escape. He was grateful they were leaving, to tell the truth. In Makimura, Naruto-sama was in so high demand. Between the Starry Eyes assistant and her constant demands, he approved some of her writings. The head in girls and the casino boat manager, the nervous owner of the delicacy shop which had first offered Naruto-sama cover, the fire brigade leadership, said leadership's obsession with taking over the kitchen and making explosives hidden in fruits that the clone jutsu was rather necessary. Add to that keeping both Sasuke and Sai under control, guarded by vigilant Tsubaki and Taiki, and he barely had any time for Kabuto. They wouldn't be alone on the road to Konoha, but 4 people were better than closer to 20 every day. The safe house was the old-fashioned type with one big room that served as living area, dining room and bedroom that Naruto-sama shared with his minions. It had obviously been a bit tight fit even before the arrival of Kabuto, his gift and the root shinobi, but expecting 8 people, 3 of them under suspicion and guard, to sleep in the same room was simply impractical. Naruto-sama had appropriated Matsuzaki's storehouse for temporary lodgings, which had led to arguments about the placing of the 3 guests. Tsubaki had insisted that Kabuto and Sasuke be separated lest they intrigue together, a sensible precaution in itself, but this had left the question of dividing the ninja to guard the 3. Tsubaki and Taiki, the most capable of Naruto-sama's underlings, not counting Kabuto, couldn't share a guard, which had irritated the woman terribly. In the end, Tsubaki had decided to watch Kabuto in the safehouse's storage room while Taiki was looking after Sasuke and Sai in the storehouse. Kabuto was glad a Jounin had been given to Naruto-sama as a backup in a peaceful place like Makimura. Konoha was the only village populous enough to assign Jounin, so he was less happy that fooling the woman with genjutsu had been so easy, though it worked for him now. Taiki was harder. While Tsubaki had been a solid Jounin, good enough at everything, but exceptional at nothing, the man was a former Onbu member, from a subdivision that dealt with some of the most desperate people in the 5 countries. He didn't bother with genjutsu at all, but employed one of the Yamanaka family jutsu and deepened the man's light sleep to deep unconsciousness. There was a small cot on the room set aside for Sasuke, in between a few crates. Kabuto was entirely unsurprised to find that the boy was walking a circle around the small floor space like a caged animal. On the other side of a higher wall of crates, Sai wasn't asleep either, but Kabuto didn't mind the other listening in. He hadn't come to spare Sasuke's privacy. "That is not a good idea," he stated, amused when the Uchiha turned sharply around, his face flushing in the dim light that reached the room through a small window near the ceiling. Sasuke had a long way to go before he reached his brother's level if he couldn't even control his own reactions. Kabuto knew how this conversation would go, and he knew it would more than likely deal some psychological damage to Sasuke. There were things the child wasn't ready to confront yet. But as long as he didn't leave without Naruto-sama's permission, Kabuto was fine with that. "How he is so strong?" Sasuke spat the question out. "I can understand the cult, they are just weak civilians. I can understand the two from Mist, they never even made proper Jinan. But Taiki? You? What Naruto did to get you? Do you know what the will of fire is?" Outsiders take it for Konoha mysticism, philosophy, and Konoha lets them think what they will. In truth, it is a chakra control technique. Not one I have ever managed. I'm much too fragmented, and this technique requires the user is sane. He knew he held Sasuke's full attention. The council's handprint was clearly visible on the boy. One so easily exploitable should never have been allowed outside the village's walls. But Danzo liked them broken, liked them easily owned, and if Kabuto's only choice had been by whom, he had at least made a choice that didn't break him more, that bandaged him. That might even fix him one day. Chakra is half mental energy. The will of fire is to make your goal, your dream or a mission, into an inseparable part of yourself. To eat it and drink it, to breathe it, to make it your cloak and bed, and to make it your blade, and remain a whole person. It is a delicate balance to find, one which requires a great deal of. Maybe idealism is a wrong word. The person has to be wholesome enough that their goal doesn't destroy them. There were other focusing techniques that didn't have such harrowing requirements, of course, but Kabuto wasn't there for Sasuke's benefit. He didn't mention them. How come killing Itachi isn't wholesome enough? He is a traitor, a kinslayer. He's still a threat to everybody, Sasuke shouted. Really, such an uncontrolled boy. Even if Sai had been asleep earlier, now he couldn't possibly be. You didn't care about the threat he is, you want to stop hurting. There is nothing wrong with that, now for the kill, when the throat was bared. But while you hate him, you love him also. You can't master enough focus with the divide inside you, and this is why Naruto-sama has surpassed you. Within him there is only unity. The fault was in Sasuke, not in Konoha. And if the boy broke a little, Kabuto was certain that Naruto-sama could shore him up again. Now it was better to return before Naruto-sama's shift was up. 053. Earth's Sandaimate Tsuchika Janaki of both scales was an old man, and age brought some privileges with it to balance the weakening, aching body and finding you had outlived pretty much everyone, friends, allies and enemies likewise. One of the privileges he had claimed was a small army of scribes who did his paperwork according to his orders. They were all former active duty jounin of his village, retired either due to age or injury, and he knew he could trust them implicitly. These days he only signed the papers with his own hand. This was important. Deep within the belly of the earth a sure hand had painted an old document white with correction fluid, taking special care with the nooks and crannies left around and inside the kanji of Anaki's name to make certain no difference in the color of the paper could be detected. Assassination of Morimoto Tomomi, B-class recipient, Kakuzu General Information Morimoto Tomomi, Chonin, Register ID 015652, is to be considered a liability to the security of Iwagakure no Sato due to the high level of emotional dependence of Tsuchikage candidate Datara, Jounin, Register ID 015611, on this individual. In broad terms, codependency refers to the dependence on the needs of or control of another, often characterized by excessive compliance or control patterns. For further information on the decision-making criteria, consult file, Psychological Assessments, Datara Idaho 015611. Minimum requirements Morimoto Tomomi is to die within 3 days of the acceptance of this mission by means that implicate a foreign village or a known missing nin. Payment standard B-class assassination payment, to be rendered after proof of death has been given. Due to the confidential nature of the mission, no receipt will be given. Signed Sandaimate Tsuchika Janaki. In the country of Earth an explosive had been prepared and the fuse was slowly burning shorter and shorter. 054. Wind Naruto had arrived to Tea Country by land, but he left by sea. The Sea Sprite was a quick tourist ship that would take them from Makimura to a fire country city near the borderlands that separated them from Water Country's sphere of influence, cutting the curve of the Tea Country foreland. He had been on ships before, mostly during his short time as Jiraiya's apprentice, but it was still new enough that he ran to the ship's bow to meet the waves and the wind head on. It was a beautiful day and the whole world was blue and white, sky and fluffy clouds above him, the deep blue sea with whitecap waves below him. The wind pushed his back like it had the strength to lift him up, and Naruto spread his arms. "One day I'm going to fly," he shouted over the wind and the waves to the presence behind him. It was a bit cold and the tourists were all huddled under the deck, leaving only the shinobi hiding among them to enjoy the space and the privacy. "Be careful, Naruto-sama," Kabuto said and stepped beside him. For once Tsubaki-chan wasn't standing guard and Naruto wondered if his friend maybe used a clone to ditch her. He knew she meant well and was just worried about him and stuff, but it was really difficult to have conversations when she listened to everything. Neither Kabuto nor Sasuke nor apparently Sai were very open. "Not one day," Kabuto said quietly, and Naruto spun around to ask if he knew some really cool wind jutsu that made people fly, but Kabuto wasn't looking at him at all, but towards northeast. That was where Konoha was, far, far beyond even the best-looking glass sight. "Not just one day when the plans have reached their completion, but 3 days from now." Ah, he was talking about Danzo. "Yeah, don't leave to tomorrow what you can do today. Procrastination's a bad habit," he shared Iruka-sensei's pearls of wisdom. "Who knows how many people's lives he's ruining even now." The thought made him angry and a lick of fire ran over his chakra, but he pushed it back, frowning. Come to think of it, Kyuubi had been really active lately. What was up with the furball? "Naruto-sama, I would advise you," Kabuto offered with the same kind of voice Naruto had used Ebisu and some other guys use when they talked to Sandaime Jiji and now Tsunade Bakken. He guessed, it was kind of insistent, but also really, he didn't know. Obedient like. Naruto's vocabulary had drastically improved since Jiraiya had taken him as a student, but the words subservient and deferential had yet to make it to his thesaurus. For all his griping, Jiraiya actually preferred it that way. "Sasuke is precious to you. Your village is precious to you, this is true, right?" he asked, and Naruto was going to answer of course, but Kabuto wasn't done yet. "Then don't let Sasuke be there when we accost Danzo. In fact, it might be better if you weren't there either." The smile he gave was sheepish, like the one he had given in the Chunin exams when he had admitted failing the exams how many times already. Naruto didn't like it, though back then he had felt intense kinship. "Why not? And don't smile if you don't mean it, that's almost as creepy as Sai's," he complained, though Kabuto couldn't quite meet the same creepy levels with his smile alone. At least he knew how his face worked and didn't look like he was contemplating axe murder. "Am I your precious person, Naruto-sama?" Kabuto asked, the smile disappearing. He had that intense look again, like when he had looked towards Konoha. "Of course," Naruto said. "It wasn't like went around befriending people for the sheer hell of it. He always meant business." "Would you deceive me knowingly?" Kabuto asked, his eyes doing this funny flutter that Naruto wasn't sure how to read. "Of course not," he denied hotly. "Trust me, please, Naruto-sama. You are better off not meeting Danzo. He can be very garrulous when it suits him." Naruto was briefly distracted by wondering what garrulous meant, and then the moment was over, Tsubaki-chan walking towards him with sullen Sasuke in tow. Sasuke was pale like a ghost and his eyes had dark shadows, like he hadn't slept a wink last night. "Okay, I guess. Sasuke's been really weird anyway," he promised. "And Sai too. What you said to him anyway?" he asked. Sai was in some strange sort of limbo. He hadn't really renounced Danzo, but he wasn't protesting anything either. Actually, he was walking around looking like someone hit him over the head with a really big hammer. He was making frantically notes to his book, with normal ink, and giving Naruto some really funny stares. "Maybe you should ask him. I'm certain he would welcome a private conversation with you, Naruto-sama," Kabuto said, and then Tsubaki-chan and Sasuke were there, Sasuke avoiding his eyes for all he was worth. The wind was at their back, taking them closer and closer to Konoha. 055. Spirit. Many scholars theorize that the tailed beasts were personification of negative emotions, born out of the bad karma of the sinful humankind, that Juubi had been the negativity undivided and that the Sage of Six Paths had broken it to its base components. They theorized that Kyuubi was the personification of hate. It was complete rubbish, of course, but what else should be expected from the vicious ants? The only human worth anything had been their father, and now Rikudo Sennin was 2 long millennia dead. It was true that Kurama could sense negative emotions, a fact which hadn't made his current incarceration any more comfortable. He could actually feel a measure of sympathy towards Uzumaki Naruto. Unlike Uchiha Madara, who had simply taken control of him, calling him a weapon, And unlike Senju Hashirama who had sealed him into his wife, unlike Uzumaki Mito who had helped her husband and chained him, and unlike Uzumaki Kushina who had made an informed decision and accepted her duty as his prison, Naruto had been a baby whose opinion no one had been interested in. Kurama had simply been shoved into him, a little baby in post-Kyuubi Konoha, and Naruto was almost as trapped as Kurama was. But at that point Kurama was fed up with the Jinchuriki and with the Juubi damned village the Uchiha and Senju had spawned. He'd had half of his chakra violently ripped away from him. His current Jinchuriki was the son of the man who had done it, and the Shinigami's seal would see to it that if the little insect died with the seal still whole, he would die as well. What little sympathy Kurama felt for Naruto was by far overshadowed by his hate. No, he wasn't personification of hate, but he was living up to his reputation nicely. And just when he had thought it impossible, Naruto had come up with an entirely new and fascinating way to fan those flames. A Jinchuriki cult. A religion that beatified those reviled human cages, a religion that had first claimed Yondaime Hokage as a saint and now claimed Rikudo Sennin as well. His father. He had always seized any kind of opportunity to gain control over Naruto, provoking his rage and so allowing his influence within his chakra to consume the boy, frustrated beyond measure that while humans were so very capable of rage, this one just wouldn't allow himself to fully give into it. Now he had redoubled his efforts, searching for the smallest opening. But there was new security in his own strength in Naruto, something that couldn't be called serenity, but that still kept anger at bay even when he fought the damnable Uchiha. Kurama threw himself against the gates of his prison and cursed Yondaime Hokage and Shiki Fuujin, cursed Umino Iruka and Haku and Uchiha Sasuke. I'm not going to let you hurt Iruka anymore, you jerk. When a person has something important they want to protect, that's when they can become truly strong. I won't let you leave, even if I have to beat you within an inch of your life. Naruto had learned what shouldn't have been possible for him to ever know, but Kurama wasn't beaten yet. This was one religious debate he was going to win even if it was the death of them both. 056. Breakfast Miwa wasn't the biggest city Naruto had ever seen, but even from the deck of the ship that had taken his group to the city it appeared easily the most colorful and lively. The Fire Country capital was bigger, but it had been an awfully stuffy place, temples with ornamental tower pavilions and kidney-shaped ponds and houses with pillars and decorated roofs. That one city in Water Country had been even bigger, but there had been slums and it had been a pretty sad-looking place, like a wet puppy that gave you pitiful looks so you would take it in from the rain and feed it. Miwa had banderols and signboards in bright red, deep blue and some really eye-grabbing neon colors, busy-looking streets with roofs so near each other he would barely have to hop from one to the other, and a huge fish market next to the harbor. It was a homely-looking city and Naruto loved it on sight. Too bad they couldn't stay for a day or two, but busy. Danzo couldn't wait. La la la, come morning, come day, I wish in me heart it was Sunday, Naruto sung as he marched down the landing plank to the wharf, clutching his shirt over his heart. Miso for breakfast all week long, and sweet ramen on a Sunday. The ship had only offered traditional breakfast, sadly enough, but here they could surely buy some ramen. I thought it was supposed to be sake, dobi, Sasuke grumbled as he stepped after Naruto. Naruto shook his head. No way, I'm much too young to drink. They didn't let you do that in auto, did they? Because it's really bad for your liver, you know. He asked, worried. It would be just like Orochimaru to be even more responsible adult than Uro-sensei was. Don't be stupid. Of course I didn't. There is nothing wrong with my liver, Sasuke barked, his face red. Sai tilted his head and looked confused, but then, he rarely looked anything else. What if I like miso better? He asked. Naruto hung his head sadly over his heathen tastes, but then, more for him. Then we can steal each other's breakfast all the week, it works out in the end, he said. Sai took out his book again and started trying to rhyme that, without much success, but Naruto noticed how he didn't walk into anything or anyone even though his face was in the book. He was so going to demand Uro-sensei taught him to do that once he returned, it would be so cool. Except maybe he didn't have to wait, Tsubaki-chan probably knew the trick too. Someone said something good-natured and polite to Tsubaki as they walked down the street, something about having two so cute sons, and then asked if the two pale-haired were her nephews or cousins. Naruto wasn't really listening to the small talk since his eyes were roving the streets for ramen stands, but then Sasuke stiffened suddenly. You, he hissed to Naruto and clutched his neck over the seal that stuck out from the pale skin, so bright and angry. I think she would rather claim you. You are wholesome. It came so out of nowhere that Naruto stumbled over his 2 feet as he turned to look at Sasuke. Thanks? What? He asked, but Sasuke turned his face away. How being wholesome works? Sai asked, and while Naruto had already learned that his questions tended to be weird with the side order of inappropriate, this was getting suspicious. Rice and miso for breakfast with a side dish of shared angst. There was something bugging Sasuke and Sai and he was going to get to the bottom of it. 057. Lunch so you protect the roots of the tree. What have you done that protects Konoha? I have killed Konoha's enemies. You believe that makes you necessary? Even Green Genon can kill for Konoha. Sai was running at steady pace, behind Sasuke and before Taiki. They were traveling an old gravel road between gently sloping hillsides, dotted only by a few wooden houses and shallow streams, towards a green line at the horizon. Once they reached Konoha's security zone, he should escape and haste to warn Danzo-sama. Or should he? Sai wasn't used to feeling unsure of his duty. His duty was to obey, but to obey whom? He was most uncomfortable operating with conflicting, incomplete intel. Tsubaki had taken place in front of Sasuke, Kabuto by her right side, and Uzumaki Naruto had taken the point. Tsubaki was Naruto's superior, probably. She was a Jounin and Naruto only a Genon, but she had been sent as backup, to assist. She deferred to Naruto's judgment regarding Kabuto, Sasuke and Sai himself, even though she reserved the right to voice her doubts. The unclear chain of command was a risk in the field and she should have known better, yet she made the situation appear easy to manage. Adaptable, the Kiri defector had called her disposition and mumbled something about water elemental chakra, though Sai was certain she was fire type. Kabuto turned his head, easily deflecting the general focus of Sai's attention. He wasn't certain of the exact limits of the man's capabilities at this time, but it was clear that the traitor was easily superior in skill and power to Sai, maybe all of them with possible exception made for Naruto and Taiki. The Jinchuriki's reported power levels fluctuated too much to get a proper estimate and he didn't know the extent of Taiki's skills. Why don't you talk to him? Kabuto asked, and the questioning cant in his voice forced Sai to forcibly relax his shoulders, to resist a grimace. He had been conditioned to not respond to the animal impulse to flinch after suffering physical damage, yet that tone made him want to argue even when there was nothing to argue against. I am a tool to protect Konoha. You have nothing else to say? Then again, capacity to reason isn't in high demand in Root, now is it? Sandaime disbanded Root, Sai. He decided that to strip humanity from Konoha is to strip Konoha from Konoha. So what are you protecting? Naruto, he called the Jinchuriki's name, lengthening his stride while Naruto turned his head and grinned. That ever-present happiness didn't fail to take Sai aback again. The Jinchuriki made the best high-danger assassins, not to mention the high-destruction ones, yet he couldn't imagine Naruto serving in that capacity. Yeah? What is it? Naruto asked, jumping over a small tree that had fallen across the road, then grabbing a branch and throwing the trunk to the side of the road with ease. There, now it isn't going to bother people. His rhythm had barely broken at all. Sai wondered why he had bothered. You are wholesome. Sai begun, making Naruto groan. He didn't let that stop himself. Are you still useful to Konoha? He asked. Naruto cocked his head to the side and snorted. Obviously. I'm totally devastating, like those orange, poisonous toads, they are cool and so is their jutsu, he boasted, and Sai remembered that in nature the brightest colored animals were the most dangerous. He looked at mild and mellow Kabuto, Kabuto who called him Naruto-sama, and Sasuke who glared daggers at him, but didn't object, surprisingly. Just few days ago he would have sworn that those two would only return to Konoha in chains or body bags. When an enemy was enemy no longer, wasn't the enemy dead then? Even if the person wasn't? Vision that doesn't make you happy, doesn't make you productive member of the village, or even somehat proficient in anything more subtle than outright slaughter. Vision that Konoha has rejected once already. Vision of Danzo, if you haven't got it in you to be angry for being used, are you angry then for being wasted? I don't know what wholesome issues you have got here, but real ninja aren't controlling jerks. I guarantee you, the ones going on and on about people being tools are the biggest hypocrites. Just look at Zabuza. He said he wanted to overthrow the Mizukage because he was a tyrant and then he became an enforcer for another tyrant for rebellion money. Seriously, what the hell? Naruto asked, lifting his face upwards as if to ask intervention from some higher being, but then his features softened, gentled. At least he regretted in the end. Trying to have the last word with Naruto is like having a lunch with a tiger. The food may be good, but the tiger always eats the last. 058. Dinner. Naruto wasn't a vicious person by nature, but he was occasionally willing to make an exception. The Yakuza of Makimura could have testified to that. It was like a joke. Two wolves and a saber-toothed sheep walked into a diner. They had covered a good distance already when the oppressive, dark clouds started to gather in the sky. It wasn't quite dark yet and they could have gone a while longer when they happened upon an old barn, half filled with hay, but Tsubaki-chan decreed they should stop and Naruto was all too happy to do so, as he wasn't too keen on sleeping under a tree in rain. Sai was muttering something about confused chain of command, but he decided that Sasuke and his issues were enough to bite that night and ignored it. Sasuke, who walked into a nearby kind of forest except too small to brood and didn't come back when the rain started. Right. Figures. So Naruto went after him because if Sasuke happened to be wet, well, it was his problem, not a reason to delay the talk. He found his dark, brooding teammate standing under a buna tree, hanging his head and slouching. Naruto wasn't precisely cold, but water was running down his neck and back and he was feeling pretty dark himself when he jumped under the cover of the leaves. Then he looked at Sasuke closer. So, nice weather? He tried and pressed against the tree. It protected him from some of the rain, but it was a plant, not an umbrella. Sasuke was dripping even more than Naruto was, but he still managed to look scornful. Naruto blushed and bristled. So it was a dumb thing to say, yeah, didn't Sasuke already know that the filter between his brain and mouth was kinda faulty? Look, I'm trying to have a conversation here. And you are the one too dumb to come in from the rain. Asshole. Naruto kicked a patch of grass that had never done a thing to him. Things weren't this awkward before, he didn't even know why he got all shy and nervous all of a sudden. It wasn't like Sasuke was going to run away again, right? Asshole? Is that the best you can come up with? The jerk asked and all bashfulness evaporated in a second. So that was how he wanted to play it? Fine then, Naruto could deliver. Bootlegger. Nitwitted bastard of a freshwater pirate and a scabby mule with the brains of an oyster with shits that was dropped on its head as a baby. What? Sasuke mouthed after a good, long pause. Naruto grinned as he watched Sasuke's befuddled face. Hey, he didn't get to see the ice prince drop his jaw every day. Jiraiya-sensei spends a lot of time at red light districts. Lots and lots of time. Naruto nodded sagely. He had learned that once you edited out all the mentions of between legs, body parts and sex acts, those people had some fun curses. He had also learned well over 50 words for female parts, roughly half of them something he didn't even want to think too loud for the feared Tsubaki-chan might hear and half so convoluted that walking past a fruit stand or a flower shop or a fishwife stand could make Sakura-chan blush if she read some of that poetry shit the geisha liked so much. A few hundred years ago people had so many words for the female parts that it was really hard to have a conversation about anything without inadvertently mentioning at least two of them. Seriously, who makes a temple synonym for a geisha house and purse for, well, that part? So you say I'm one of your precious people and chase after me, Sasuke begun. He didn't quite unbend enough to make quotation marks with his fingers, but Naruto could hear them in his voice loud and clear. What if I say I can't stop caring for my brother? His voice dripped snide all over the place, more than the tree dripped water. That bastard, Naruto grumbled and again the red-hot otherness inside him licked his chakra like a hungry dog. He kicked it down firmly. Sasuke was an idiot and a bastard, but he needed him now, no time for stupid personal theatrics. You don't think I'm disgusting? Sasuke asked. He was still trying to sound cold and mean, but not quite pulling it off. It was dark, the sun low and behind thick, dark clouds, and Naruto didn't see Sasuke's face all that well, but the way his errant teammate hunched his shoulders made Naruto want to hug Sasuke. He thought better about it since Sasuke would only punch him. Then he did it anyway. What the, stop it, you idiot. Sasuke did punch him, but it was a weak, feeble thing and Naruto could hear a small, quiet sob. The red was back then, a thick, suffocating blanket over him as he imagined tearing Itachi's heart from his chest with his bare fingers and blood everywhere, red, red, red. He couldn't remember how he pushed the red back this time, but when he came back to his senses, they were both dry and the raindrops falling on his skin were sizzling. Naruto wasn't a vicious person by nature. Iruka-sensei had once long ago told him that a real agreement was something more than two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. Naruto had agreed then, imagining the sheep in orange color, having only seen black and white pictures of the creatures and hay, his woolen clothes were orange, and feeling a lot of sympathy for the poor creature. Sasuke was wide-eyed and looked a little scared, so Naruto hugged him again, and this was where the simile came crashing down because he thought of Itachi. The mental picture of woolly, bloody saber-tooth, sheep Itachi was fairly ridiculous because it was so devastatingly cute. Bah, sheep Itachi bleated and fluttered its red, swirly eyes inside Naruto's head. He smirked. He was hungry, he was going to have a dinner and he was going to invite Sasuke because he was generous like that. Uro-sensei was kind of lazy and a pervert, but he was good and Naruto was going to train, and if Itachi didn't want to get eaten, well, too bad. It was up to a vote and it was 2 against 1 now. 059. Food evil wasn't a word that Tsubaki wanted to throw around lightly, she was a killer for hire after all. But she remembered the Kyuubi's attack and she was confident in calling that creature evil, its chakra terrifying in its raw killing intent. It was overwhelming, it was malicious, it had been thick in the air like the smell of blood and smoke from the burning buildings, and every breath she had taken had been a battle against freezing and terror. Now she stood in the rain and watched his charge, hugging the Uchiha. Terrible anger was radiating off the boy, bringing back scorching memories with it, but Naruto was even in his anger infinitely gentle. "I think we should leave," she said, her tongue turning clumsily in her mouth as she turned her back to the picture. This gave some food for thought. Literally, almost. She thought of Naruto's precious Iruka-sensei. Iruka-sensei said this, Iruka-sensei did that, always Iruka-sensei first, to the extent that mentions of Kakashi-sensei and Uro-sensei sometimes seemed almost afterthoughts. She thought of Naruto's precious ramen, how the boy could scarf even the tasteless instant kind down bowl after bowl. A bowl of vegetables served with love is better than a 3-course meal served with hatred, she remembered the old proverb. Not that Naruto ever failed to complain about vegetables, but he ate them all the same because Iruka-sensei had told him they were an important part of a shinobi's diet, and Iruka-sensei was never wrong. "Shouldn't we keep guard in case he loses control of the bijou?" Saya asked, a black and white shadow in the dark. Kabuto's hand moved just a little bit closer to something that was in all likelihood sharp and pointy, and Tsubaki found much to her horror that right now, just for that, she approved of the man. They were huddling in the rain, just far enough that the two Jinan shouldn't notice them as long as they didn't start shouting. Taiki managed to stay dry somehow, deflecting the raindrops so his hair and clothes were just a bit damp. Kabuto wasn't dry, gratifyingly enough, but he managed to look very dignified and regal even when he looked like someone had thrown him overboard on their way over the gulf. Sai looked like someone might have thrown him to the sea and he wouldn't have cared, making Tsubaki wonder if she was in need of some remedial weather desensitization training. She was cold and the water was running down her back, and even her underwear was damp by now, chafing as she moved. "Let's go back," she said, and started shepherding her group back towards the barn. "No one is losing control here, no sense in getting even more wet than we already are." "But how?" Taiki asked, walking slowly, turning his head to look over where the two boys disappeared into the shadows of the trees and the rain. "How can he feel like that and not do anything?" Tsubaki smiles as she recalled the day she had taken this mission, how she and Iruka had eaten at Ichiraku's, the warm sun and the rich taste of the broth and the misery she had now left behind. "There are 2 men in Konoha. One of them is an academy teacher, the other is a ramen chef, and when we return I'm going to kiss them both." And if there was still a hint of Kyuubi against the backdrop of the forest, the bite of it felt almost safe, like the canned wasabi beans that had been her comfort food since she was 10 years old. 060. Drink. The first time Deidara met Morimoto Tomomi he didn't think much of her. She was 2 years older than he was, yet they graduated the same year, and when she took her Chunin exams he stood in front of a panel that reviewed his Jounin evaluation scores. She didn't have many prospects of ever becoming a Jounin either, though of course she wasn't a bad kunoichi. She was dependable, the sort whose dedication to her village was beyond question, who was good on missions and didn't bring her drama to the battlefield. She wasn't the type to have any personal drama, period. She was supportive of her friends and comrades and an all-over nice person. She was pretty in the girl next door kind of way. She wasn't the type to catch a young genius eye. She was one of the 2 Chunin assigned to Deidara on his second mission as a Jounin. That mission was an unmitigated disaster. The information given to them had been inaccurate. Instead of 4 Kiri missing nin trying to form a drug ring, there had been 15 from Kiri, Kumo, and Ame, 3 of them Jounin level. The Chunin named Yasu died in combat, and Deidara and Tomomi were taken prisoner, to be tortured for high-price information. As Deidara was the one in possession of more classified information and he was presumably the tough one as well, the missing nin decided to soften him before working him over. Sleep deprivation, they decided, some beatings, and of course the psychological torture of watching his comrade being tortured and breaking before his eyes. Tomomi didn't break on day 1 and she didn't break on day 2. On day 3 they drugged her water, and while she tasted what had been done to it, the foul drink was forced down her throat. "We want dirt, little kunoichi, dirt on your precious village. Have you ever been part of a political assassination?" An androgynous man the others called Osamu asked Tomomi after her eyes crossed, though Deidara wasn't perfectly certain he wasn't in fact a she. "Assasas." Tomomi tried to pronounce the word, sounding confused. "Kill," Osamu corrected himself with a disgusted tone. Bound and gagged, Deidara could only listen in helplessly. There is a thing about prodigies and geniuses in the ninja world, something that might make being one not worth the cost. They have this disconnect from their peers, never quite understanding the why and how of other people because they are so different, though some hide this better than others. They also tend to be fragile in ways that aren't always outward obvious. That day Datara wallowed in the dishonor of his failure, something he hadn't ever known before, not even contemplating escape because he was too busy contemplating suicide. Kill, Tomomi sniffled. My poor. I had red and orange and that white sort with the violet thing at the center, you know. Zinnias. You killed your potted plant? Osamu uttered flatly, clearly unimpressed with this confession. I didn't mean to. Tomomi defended herself brokenly. Even with the gag it had to be obvious at this point that Datara was gaping. They were so happy flowers. Maybe. It's kinda difficult to tell with plants. And then there were my forget-me-nots. I sort of forgot to water them before I left for a mission. When I finally returned they were dead too. Tomomi went on and on and on about her inability to keep her flowers alive, telling of the gardenias and the lavenders and the red spider lilies. When she got to the bonsai tree some optimistic fool had given to her as a birthday present, Osamu was the one who snapped and delivered her a harsh slap. Guaranteed to make people talk, oh yes. She? Dashed threw the drug vial to a wall. Now for the love of the great jade dragon, shut up. They were then taken to the cell they shared. That was one extra bit of cruelty, as they were chained to opposite walls so Datara could see Tomomi in pain and not touch, not help her. She drooped her head druggedly, but when the door was slammed shut, she lifted her face and her eyes were a lot clearer. Her skin was bruised and blooded and clammy, but there was a ghost of smile on her lips. That drink clearly hadn't been enough to fully divest her of her wits. I've never had a bonsai tree, she confessed to him. Of course no one was stupid enough to give me one. She slurred a little and Datara wondered if he had understood her right. Why you claim to have one? He asked, surprised he could muster any curiosity over the issue. Well, it was obviously annoying them. It's the principle of the thing, Tomomi answered with a prim voice and then ruined the effect by laughing. It was a short and pained bark, but it was the real thing, going all the way up to her eyes and Datara could only think oh shit, now I'm in trouble. How could he stand to watch her being tortured now? Yet what else could he do? This was when she threw him a senbone she had palmed during the interrogation session, still stained with her own blood. You are the better fighter. Make it count, she said. This was the first time Datara did what Tomomi told him to. He decided it was obviously a sensible strategy. This was the woman Datara depended on for sanity like thirsty man depends on water. There was a reason Aniki never harmed a hair on her head despite that fateful psychological evaluation. Danzo would have been wise to follow his example. 061. Winter Konoha didn't get much in the way of winter, the village was too far in the south for the temperature to drop below zero very often. That year they hadn't gotten snow even once before Naruto had left, but the winds from the west were chilly and the weather was uncommonly wet. The rain had started the day Hokage Jiji had been buried, or rather, his ashes had been buried as no one had wanted to risk rinse and repeat of the Edo Tensei catastrophe, and it had only gotten more and more frequent since, like it was the summer and rainy season instead of late winter. It was even wetter than in water country and that, Naruto decided, was really kind of sad. But at least the dreadful weather meant that there were fewer people out that day. The people on duty were on duty of course, since being a loyal shinobi wasn't something that got called off on account of trout swimming at your shoulder level, almost, but everybody who could be inside was. With the exception of one self-proclaimed blue beast of Konoha and his student who were running around Konoha on top of the Great Wall and shouting how the flames of the youth were keeping them dry. Was that some kind of defensive genjutsu? Taiki managed to utter, his jaw hanging open just the littlest bit. I think the cherry blossom petals and the sunset were. Tsubaki-chan muttered and pushed her wet locks off her face. I had forgotten how, intense that can get. Is that even legal to do in public? Sai asked and stared at Naruto. He had more of an expression on than any of them had gotten out of the boy previously. Technically yes, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. You try that and they will dress you in green skin-tight spandex and wake you up every morning at 4:30 and before you know it you'll be speaking with capital letters too and then you can't ever pull off an infiltration mission again, he cautioned Sai. Not that Sai could have pulled one off now if his life depended on it, but that was an unnecessary detail. Sai asked wildly inappropriate question all the time, like about sexual practices from that one monk that all but swallowed his tongue, and he was just weird enough he could think making a trio out of the youthful duo was a good idea. And that, Naruto decided as he remembered one of Iruka-sensei's long-ago lessons, would be a war crime of some sort and committing war crimes during the peace would be even sadder than wet winter. Okay, this is our plan, he said. You, Sasuke, are our ticket through the gates without search. I mean, Sai should have travel papers, you have them, right? He asked Sai, who nodded and picked a stack of papers from his pouch. The travel papers were a simple pass telling whoever looked at them that a person, name here, had been sent on a sanctified mission by the Hokage. Not that a nin couldn't get back to Konoha without those, but with them it was simply a matter of walking through the gate after the two Chunin visibly standing guard checked you were the person the papers had been given to. If a nin lost the papers, he or she had to stand in front of the gates while the guards manning the post went things over the long way and jump through every hoop to verify that the person standing in front of them had left Konoha legitimately and wasn't in fact AWOL, and after that they got slapped with a reprimand for losing the papers unless there were some really mitigating circumstances. Great, so Taiki's defecting and that's why he hasn't got papers. Everybody's going to make ballyhoo about you returning, so no one should pay too much attention to Taiki and Kabuto anyway. If they insist on bothering by the book and keeping you, though, are you okay with that? He turned his head towards Taiki. Of course, the infuriatingly dry-looking man said, appearing surprised he was even asked. It had to be the Kiri thing again. Okay, if they keep you, try to stall when you tell them things. It's probably going to be at least half an hour before they get anyone to review you, and after that just tell them about things before Kabuto came in detail, lots of details. But don't lie. That's only going to get you into trouble. He gave the orders and Taiki assured him that he had no intention of lying to the T&I at all, even less if Marino Aviki was the one doing the review. It was kind of funny, that people were that scared of the man. Sure, he was grumpy and scary looking, but he hadn't dragged a date back after the T-country race by the hair, so he had to be a nice person deep down. So Kabuto, can you make some sort of genjutsu that gets you through? He turned his attention to the one this whole ballyhoo was about. Of course, Naruto-sama. I won't be invisible per se, but I will affect people's perception of me to make myself uninteresting. With Sasuke as a distraction, this should be enough. His fingers flicked through a multitude of seals so quickly they seemed to blur, and then Naruto found himself looking at a U next to his friend. It was a good one. So he led his merry, and not so merry in case of Sasuke and Sai, bunch to the great gates, thinking about Danzo and Sakura-chan, though for completely different reasons. It had been a long, miserable winter, trouble after trouble after trouble after Orochimaru and Sasuke being an idiot, but now it was over. Naruto whistled as he marched up the road, and Izuko and Kotetsu's eyes widened until they were rounder than Lee's. 062. Spring Haruno Sakura was sitting on her bed, reading through one of her sensei's medical scrolls, a topic of which was the muscles of the legs. Biceps femoris, part of the hamstrings group. Sakura pushed the scroll away for a moment and went through everything she could remember of that particular muscle. It was a lateral muscle of posterior thigh, two heads joined to different muscle groups, but what was the lower head part of again? It extended from the ischial tuberosity to the lateral condyle of tibia. It flexed the knee and extended the thigh. The long head had a tendon common with the semitendinosus muscle, right? She looked at the scroll and saw that she had remembered correctly, though of course her knowledge had been incomplete. Biceps femoris was a muscle commonly injured in physical activity that required explosive bending of the knee as seen in sprinting. If the ninja was fatigued or hadn't warmed up properly, they could suffer a hamstring strain or rupture, which was the tearing of the hamstring muscle. Avulsion of the biceps femoris tendon was the complete pulling away of the tendon from the bone. Ouch! Tsunade-sama's medical scrolls made for a really depressing reading, telling all the fascinating ways ninja life could screw the human body up even without direct enemy contact. She had lately had to suppress the instinct to yell at a certain green-clad Jinan to be careful with his tendons, damn it, because she was the one whom Tsunade-sama was going to make fix anything that was torn. Sakura. Sakura jumped up from her slouch, her heart hammering, but she didn't even have enough time to turn around when her window was thrown open and Ino jumped on her bed by her side. What are you still doing here? Haven't you heard? Ino demanded and dragged Sakura up so they both stood up, the mattress dipping under their feet. Ino was still wearing her sandals and they had already left several muddy prints on Sakura's previously pristine, white sheets. Sakura felt a familiar sense of annoyance starting to throb at her temple. Where were the manners these days? Someone better have invaded us again, Ino, because... She began her tirade, but Ino just shook her. Sasuke's back, Ino shouted, and Sakura could not speak a word, could not move a muscle. Blood was hammering in her ears as she stood there dumbly, and Ino went on. Naruto came back with him just a little while ago. They went to Godime-sama's office. There was some Kiri Jounin named Doihara who defected. I wonder how he's connected to this. Wasn't Sasuke in auto? Sasuke was back. Sasuke was back and Sakura had no idea how to feel. After she'd had time to think her action through after Sasuke left, she had felt terribly ashamed. The first part, the worst part maybe, the part that, thankfully no one knew but Sasuke, she had offered to leave with him. It had been a stupid spur-of-the-moment decision, and as angry as she had been with Sasuke after visiting her friends in the hospital, she had been grateful he'd at least kept her from ruining her life like that. She would never have seen her parents again, and she would have missed Ino as well, and Naruto and even Kakashi-sensei. She could have never returned to her home. She would have probably died young because of her stupidity. Except not because Naruto wouldn't have let her. Naruto. Now there was another reason to feel ashamed of herself. She had asked him to bring Sasuke back because she had been too weak to even attempt it herself, and he had wound up in a hospital for his trouble. Not that Naruto wouldn't have tried to bring Sasuke back anyway, but even then, that had been a low point for her. She had sworn to become stronger so they could do it together, drag Sasuke back by force if necessary before Orochimaru took him over, but now Naruto had kept that promise while she had been stuck learning about the muscles of human body. And despite this all, she was still grinning like a loon. Go, go. Ino pushed her and Sakura exploded into motion, uncaring of her tendons and muscles. She jumped out of her window, and only when her feet hit the ground she realized that she was still barefooted. The cold mud was splashing between her toes and she was almost immediately wet. My sandals, Ino, she shouted. Normally shoes were left by the front door, but ninja kept their footwear always near, and true enough, the next second Ino threw a pair of blue standard issue sandals out of the window. Another second and she was already running. It wasn't spring quite yet, not if one went by the calendar, but Sakura wouldn't have been surprised if the cherry trees of Konoha had started to bloom there and then from the sheer force of her joy. Even if she didn't know what else to feel, about herself and Sasuke and Naruto, at least she could feel joy that they were together again. It bubbled through her veins like her blood had been changed to soda somehow and sang in her ears like birdsong. To the foxes with the calendar, Team 7 was whole again, and Sakura decreed that spring had arrived at long last. 063. Summer. Tsunade's father had once told her, "A man will promise a lot of things in summer he won't mean in winter." It was a senju saying. Konoha at large used one that made parallels between making and delivering babies and promises to the same effect. Words were cheap. Promises were easy, it was action that came hard. Naruto had unnaturally sunny disposition, and he certainly promised a lot, the only shinobi Tsunade had ever known foolish enough to promise not to die, ever on duty, and honestly believe in his own words. By now she was starting to believe he just might manage that, somehow. In his case it wasn't a matter of gritting his teeth through the winter, though he could do that as well, but somehow warping the reality and turning winter into summer. Now he had fulfilled the promise he had made to Sakura. She just really wished he hadn't fulfilled it like this. "And you accused Danzo of what?" she asked, massaging her throbbing temples. She needed more alcohol, immediately. His actions include, but are not limited to, several counts of unsolicited assassination of Konoha citizens, unlawfully taking Konohan orphans into custody, which I believe counts as kidnapping, to indoctrinate them into members of an organization Sandaime Hokage made illegal and disbanded, conspiring with a foreign leader, Salamander Hanzo, without the knowledge of the Hokage. The silver-haired boy, a man at this point, really, went on with almost maniacal glee shining in his eyes, not minding the two Anbu standing ready to slay him at Tsunade's whim, their blades drawn. He was flanked by Naruto, who was giving her a look both pleading and so trusting it made her stomach churl, a defecting Kiri Anbu, somebody who was apparently a Konoha shinobi and still defecting to Konoha, and Tsubaki, who looked much too unapologetic for allowing this madness to occur in the first place. "And can you give me a reason why I should believe a spy of Orochimaru?" she grounded out, flinching at the betrayed look in Naruto's bright, blue eyes. Damn it. It wasn't becoming of a Hokage to show vulnerability, least of all in front of somebody who was bound to notice and take advantage of it. "I'm currently a member of the Root, Hokage-sama," the quiet one named Sai interrupted them. "I'm a Konoha shinobi, yet not in the register. I'm an orphan Danzo took, yet I doubt papers for my custody exist. I was sent to Makimura to assess Jounin Ono Tsubaki's loyalties and assassinate her if I found her traitorous. I don't believe this mission was endorsed by you. And it hadn't been, damn it all. All missions of this nature had to be assigned by the Hokage personally. Going behind her back like this was a crime in itself, and proof that the leopard hadn't changed its spots at all. Not to mention that the Root still existed, and that meant that she should probably get over her distaste of her traitorous teammate's reputed ex-flunky and hear what he had to say. "You have half an hour," she promised darkly. "Start convincing me." She came to regret those words very quickly. She tried to keep her poker face, but it wasn't helping her with this any more than it had helped her with cards. The Anbu in her office were obviously shocked as well. Their faces might be hidden by the frozen porcelain grins, but their body language became more and more obvious, broadcasting shock and dismay. Naruto had maneuvered himself between Kabuto and Sai and was now holding their hands, his face red and his chakra flaring in a way that unnerved her, his face red with some strange exertion. These sorts of things were the reason she hadn't wanted to become Hokage in the first place. If even half of what she had just heard was true, or a tenth or a fraction of a fraction, she couldn't allow this travesty to go on anymore. Now she had to take Danzo down, and that was bound to be a nightmare and a half. Enough, enough. I have heard enough. So now you profess loyalty to Konoha again? Despite everything? She asked suspiciously. Kabuto had already proved to be deceptive and vindictive. Had he only returned to avenge himself? She couldn't even really blame him for such intentions, if, again that if, his tale had been true. My primary loyalty is to Naruto-sama, but since he intends to become the Hokage, it will amount to the same thing in the end, the boy answered, undaunted. He could look so very innocent when he smiled. That was another story Tsunade needed to get out of him, he and Naruto and how that had happened, but she doubted she could bear to hear it right now. And you are defecting to us because of what? She barked, pointing a dainty finger at Doihara. The man jumped a bit, but answered promptly. Naruto decided that I'm not evil enough to fit Kiri. I found that arguing with him is an exercise in futility, he said. And you are defecting as well? She asked, her finger traveling to point at Sai. I don't know. Is it possible to defect to your own village? The boy asked, and Tsunade couldn't have cared less at this point, but he went on, maybe I could defect to Naruto's cult. Miwa-sensei was kind enough to teach me to chant. You have a cult? Don't blame me. It's all Taiki's fault. Naruto scrambled backwards, his arms failing about like a windmill's blades. I didn't do it on purpose, Doihara defended himself, looking distinctly pale. I didn't know he really was a Jinchuriki. And this cult had to do with the Jinchuriki? Of course, what else could it be? This was the sort of thing Naruto did, turning winter into summer. If she wasn't so proud of him, she might have cried when she anticipated the paperwork this would generate. She might yet cry anyway. She wasn't paid enough to deal with this, there wasn't enough money in the world and not enough alcohol either. When the door was slammed open and her apprentice barged in, jumping at Sasuke's neck. Distraction, Kami be praised. Now Naruto out of her office, yesterday. 064. Fall Naruto had already known, of course. Kabuto had told him, that was why they had come to Konoha in the first place. But he got angry again, he just couldn't help it. And like all the time lately, Kyubi was making a pest of himself, licking him with tongue of fire. But this time he could almost see it even though he was wide awake. It was like there was something orange and red just at the edge of his vision, something that moved, but when he turned his head it disappeared like water disappeared into dry sand. And there were words, just at the edges of his range of hearing. Ruto, your precious Mo. Like the cries in storm winds, almost words, almost there, Okage, you think sage. Red wind, so red, proud of his DESC. You have a cult? Tsunade Bakken screamed, and it was like he had been balancing on a rope and now someone pushed him. The red shadows were gone with a crash and so was the voice, leaving him to the tender mercies of Tsunade Bakken. Her face was plenty red, though, and her eyes glittered. It was really ominous glittering. Don't blame me. It's all Taiki's fault. He pleaded, all too happy to put the blame where it belonged. This was when the door was slammed open and Sakura-chan barged in. She was wet from head to toe and her hair lay flat against her head, now a darker shade of pink, almost red. Her hem was dirty and dripping. She was still the prettiest girl Naruto had ever seen. Sasuke-kun. She breathed and jumped at his neck. I missed you so. It hurt a little to watch her fawn over her precious Sasuke-kun, but Naruto smiled all the same. He was the one to bring Sasuke back, so he was the one to make her smile so prettily, in a way, right? But then Sakura-chan took a step back and delivered a harsh slap to Sasuke's face. Naruto's jaw dropped as the sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed in the room. How could you do that? Doesn't the word desertion mean anything to you? And you tried to kill Naruto. Don't try to tell me you didn't mean to. You put an A-rank assassination jutsu through his chest. Who does that to a teammate? He could have died, anyone else would have. Have you no heart? Sakura-chan's voice reached a pitch Naruto had previously thought human throat couldn't manage, and she punctured her tirade with one more slap, after which she threw her hands around Sasuke's neck again. At least you are back now, you can make it better. That's good, she crowed. It was a pretty quick mood swing, but it wasn't like Naruto was really angry either. Being friends was like the fall. When the leaves fell you didn't kick the trees, you encouraged them to try again next year. Besides, Sasuke's both cheeks glowed red from her strikes and he stood still and straight like an iron rod, his face panicked like a mouse's when it stood in front of a snake, and that was really hilarious. Naruto snickered a bit, but that only turned Sakura-chan's attention to him. Now he took a step back, suddenly unnerved. She was obviously kind of unhinged from the happiness, and who could tell what she might do? He had done nothing to deserve a slap. Naruto, thank you. You are a wonderful person and I'm so happy you are my teammate, she said solemnly and gathered him into a hug. Now it was his turn to stand still, his arms rigid against his sides. His eyes were stinging and he blinked them rapidly. He wasn't going to cry, really. His heart was so warm and fluttered so hard it almost hurt, and he was so happy he wouldn't have cared if she had slapped him right then. He would have done anything for her, moved mountains and beaten armies all alone. You. Now Sakura-chan pushed him away suddenly and turned to the side. Naruto stood there confused, wondering if now was the time for the slap, and then saw that she had turned towards Kabuto. Traitor, she hissed, her fingers spread like a bird's claws. Hey, he's the one who brought Sasuke back to me. In that barrel too, he defended his friend's character. And the barrel had been a nice touch, really. Is that so? Then. Thank you, I guess, she said hesitantly. She didn't look happy to thank Kabuto, but she looked less ready to horribly maim him at least. Kabuto smiled in a sheepish manner and tried to look appeasing. Is she suffering from bipolar disorder? Sai asked. How she passed her psychological evaluation. This in turn made Sakura-chan screech again in indignation. As heartwarming this scene is, this really isn't the time and place for it, Tsunade Bakken said dryly and muttered something about the evils of the paperwork that awaited her. Make Danzo do it when you catch him. He deserves it anyway, Naruto proposed and grinned when unholy light lit the Hokage's eyes. I think I will. And I'll castrate Jiraiya for leaving you alone for whole 2 months. What was he thinking would happen? The right answer probably wasn't not this. She was rubbing her knuckles and grinning really ominously. Kabuto was the one to suggest that the happy reunion could be relocated to the waiting chamber outside the office, as the participants weren't really necessary to the conversation anyway. Naruto wasn't stupid and he remembered there was something Kabuto thought he shouldn't hear or ask, but he really didn't want to leave either Sakura-chan or Sasuke right then, and if it was something he needed to know, then Tsunade Bakken would tell him anyway. He happily let himself be herded out along with his teammates and Sai. 065. Passing Naruto-sama can't find out. He couldn't keep this from Sasuke and he must not find out. The Uchiha are never the most stable people from begin with, it's the strain improvident use of the Sharingan causes on the brain, Kabuto said. Damn you, Danzo, Tsunade whispered. Damn you to hell for this. Because they might have managed to avoid the catastrophe so far, but they had no way of knowing just how many people knew and how inclined they might be to keep the secret, or to reveal it. 3 could keep a secret, they said, if 2 were dead. May Danzo rot in hell. For one day this skeleton would claw its way out of the closet and then there would be hell to pay. 066. Rain. A long time ago Sai had a brother who called himself Shin. He didn't know if Shin was his brother's real name, a code name given to him, or simply something he had made up, but Shin was Shin, and in a show of life's great ironies he dubbed his cute little brother Sai. It was written with different kanji than Sai's code name, but the kanji used meant to offer prayers, so the irony ended up counting anyway. Shin wasn't related to Sai by blood as far as they knew, though admittedly they didn't know anything about their blood families, so it was a possibility, however minuscule, but Shin insisted that genetics weren't a minimum requirement at all. Young Sai had no idea what genetics meant, but he was inclined to take Shin's word for it back when Shin lived. They only ever had one mission together. It had been the mission that got Sai blooded as part of the Roots desensitization program, and the target was simply a merchant who had somehow caused some harm to Konoha. Don't ask me what he did. Maybe he sells to Iwa too. Maybe he committed a tax fraud. It doesn't really matter anyway, Shin had told Sai. He was there as a senior operative to ensure things went smoothly and to witness the killing. Sai could remember it was a beautiful, sunny day and the merchant had reserved a room from an inn that coincidentally looked over a steep cliff to a river that divided the town in two. The river was only deep enough there that the water reached a grown man to a waist, but the flow of it was fast, the water was very cold, and most importantly the bottom of the river was full of big, sharp rocks. Shin had sighed. It was supposed to look like a natural death. This reproach had made Sai very confused. Isn't it natural to die if one falls out of the window into a river and is knocked unconscious underwater? He had asked. Maybe if the window had been open, Shin had groaned, taken his hand and shunshined them both away. Now it was raining. Sai's name meant rhinoceros and he had betrayed Danzo. It had been the last minute to do so, figuratively speaking, as he had already been scheduled for a curse seal application like all root ninja. Only this mission had delayed it, and Sai wondered if the sensation of lightness located within his chest was a psychosomatic symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. He was almost sure he wasn't traumatized, but no one had ever explained to him what being traumatized felt like, so he couldn't be sure. He was standing in the waiting chamber outside the Hokage's office and witnessing as Naruto spoke of his travels with Jiraiya and great ramen bars. Sakura spoke of her medical studies and their Jounin sensei Kakashi, who was out of village for a mission, and they both ganged up on Sasuke, asking questions and receiving mostly one-syllable answers. So Uro sensei offended this Miko, and let me tell you, some of them can do seriously weird shit when they get angry. Naruto looked like he was going to explain, but this was when Sasuke decided to volunteer a sentence. Can't all women? He asked. This made Naruto grimace and look at Sakura, but she only threw her head back and laughed. Keep that in mind. I know where your tendons are, you know, she threatened, yet her words made Naruto grin and Sasuke appeared unconcerned. Can threats of violence be used as a form of bonding? He asked. Sakura and Sasuke turned to give him a look that was. Disbelieving was close and so was exasperated, but Sai was certain he was missing some important nuance. Personhood, the art of being fully human, had read, love is also heavy rain that falls freely and washes away the hurts and chains of the corrupt heart of man, and, like thirsting saplings, the heart reaches up to the heavens, and the cry of it calls aloud for relief from thence. In the beginning it was a sunny day, Sai's name meant offering prayers, and he threw a man out of a window. Now it was raining, Sai's name had changed and he was leaning back against a window. It wasn't locked. Only if they know you don't really mean it, or if they know you mean it with love and stuff. But don't get it mixed with masochism, though Sakura-chan probably suffers from that too, what with having a thing for the bastard. After this, things happen quickly. Sakura punched Naruto, who should have been able to dodge it, but for some reason declined to do so. He was thrown back towards Sai and Sai could have dodged, but he wanted to catch Naruto. He managed, but the force behind the punch threw him back as well and the window was thrown open. It was the end of one chapter of his life. It was raining and Sai had just been thrown out of a window. He noted it was nice symmetry. He even laughed a little as he flipped over in the air. Of course he and Naruto were all right. They weren't ninja for nothing. 067. Snow. The plan Tsunade put together was simple, out of necessity. They were on a time limit and the moment Danzo found out either Kabuto or Sai were back in Konoha they would lose the element of surprise. And they needed that surprise, badly. According to Sai, there were currently 20 children under the age of 16 in the route, not counting himself. 15 of them under the age of 12 and 5 were precisely 5 years old new recruits, something Tsunade found completely revolting. If these kids, half trained in the best cases, got between Hiranbu and Danzo's Jounin in a fight, it was going to be ugly. The attack was to be three-pronged. Tsunade had sent a message to Danzo about Uchiha Sasuke's return, a message she was certain he didn't need anymore, and an order to arrive to meet her in her office. What was waiting for him there was an ambush and Shizune disguised as Tsunade to lure the man inside. Her student couldn't fool Danzo for long, but hopefully long enough for him to close the door behind him. Another part of this operation was going to be the house arrest of Utatane Koharu and Mitokado Homura. Tsunade wanted to believe they had simply been subtly controlled by Danzo's stolen Sharingan, but she couldn't allow them to roam freely before the situation had settled and they had been officially cleared of all accusations. The second prong was the Operation Think About the Children, the one Tsunade was personally leading. According to Sai and Kabuto, damn the creepy man Naruto had decided to adopt like a stray puppy. The route trainees had different schedules depending on their skill level and classes, but they all ate at the same time in the same place. The plan was to sneak in at dinner time and hopefully avoid fighting, catch them in the trainee mess hall and start to order them around. This was why Tsunade was needed personally. These children were trained to be fanatically loyal to Konoha and Tsunade was the current military dictator of the village, however little Danzo liked this fact. There was no telling if these child operatives would acknowledge the normal village hierarchy and take orders from her Jounin, but Tsunade doubted that even Danzo had gone as far as to denounce the position of the Hokage, especially since it was a position he had his eyes on. As long as there were no conflicting orders from the War Hawk, the children should follow Tsunade's orders like good little drones. Should. The third prong would be the main assault of the route headquarters after Tsunade got the children out, or if and when the distress signal came. Rooting out the agents who weren't in the headquarters would be a nightmare and the cleanup of the agents embedded in other villages would probably take years, but if everything went to a plan the main force should be crushed in an afternoon. Again, should. Tsunade was holding up an umbrella and giving the map Sai had drawn for them a last glance. They stood in front of an entrance to an old civilian shelter that had been abandoned after the Kyuubi attack because of structural damage that had been inflicted on it. It should have been demolished years ago, but somehow the issue had gotten lost in the bureaucratic swamp of the village administration. Why am I not surprised, she drawled and pushed the map down her cleavage. Sai, take point. Cat, behind me, you are responsible of the genjutsu, asp, you advance on the ceiling. Neutralize any guards we encounter. Silently. A second later only Sai could be seen entering the shelter. The above-ground part of the shelter was a sturdy, gray cube with a door. The below-ground level was a bigger gray cubicle space with everything stripped off, except, of course, an entry into a sewer separate from the main Konoha sewer network. After a long climb down, 100 crouched, narrow meters and 2 turns the sewer got. Rather absurdly spacious for a sewer. This was when they met the first guard. It was a woman with mouse-brown short hair, a mask that depicted some sort of bird on her face and her hand on the handle of her tanto. It an identification code, the woman demanded with a toneless voice. It Route 522. A red hand hanging from a tree, a silent sentinel under the tree's roots. Standing silent, loyal to the end, Sai answered with an equally flat voice. It was a nonsense sentence like all Konoha identification codes, but not one Tsunade knew, and as a Hokage she was supposed to know them all. The guard stepped aside, only to fall back, her throat slit open. She was angry as she stepped over the body that Kat's genjutsu swiftly hid from view. There had been no need for that woman to die but Danzo's delusions. Konoha was a village of special snowflakes, and while it wasn't quite as nice a place as the propaganda tended to paint it as, the truth was that they encouraged individuality as they best could in the framework of loyalty to the village. Konoha could and would demand its tithe in life and limb, in blood and tears and a series of funerals to attend to, but identity, the right to pursue personal happiness despite the risks? No. Danzo had no right. She was fuming as they passed one more guard before entering the trainee barrack division, luckily a low-level security area. There, Sai said and pointed towards a closed door. There is likely at least one adult operative supervising. Good, Tsunade growled and cracked her knuckles. It's time to save my little snowflakes. And she kicked the door open. 068. Lightning Kabuto waited in the small antechamber behind the hidden door in the Hokage's office, waiting with 5 Anbu. He knew better than to think that he was trusted by anyone except Naruto-sama, but the Hokage was banking on his hatred of Danzo to not turn on her shinobi mid-battle, and if he happened to die taking Danzo down, one less headache for her. He understood that the woman was fond of Naruto-sama, which was a good thing considering her surprisingly ruthless streak, but he would have to keep an eye on her regardless. Politics could turn even a mouse into a monster. He knew the moment Danzo stepped into the office. There wasn't a single audible step, the door didn't creak or click shut, but the tinge of Uchiha in the chakra of the man was impossible to mistake. They all acted as one. Sable shunshined between Danzo and the door, barring the way out, while Suro took her place between the man and the window. Martin, Squirrel and Crane flickered into a half circle that left Danzo now completely surrounded. Kabuto simply stepped into the office and Danzo's head immediately turned towards him. He didn't feel even the slightest hint of the fury he had half expected to consume him when he finally stood in front of the man, ready to take him down. Instead it was like all his blood had turned to ice water so cold it burned from within. He was going to kill Danzo and there was no joy in the thought. But there was satisfaction. There was a sense of completion. What is the meaning of this, Shizune? Danzo asked. Well, they hadn't really expected to fool them man any real amount of time. Shizune allowed her henge to fade and stood up, sending the legs of the chair scraping backwards on the floor. You are under suspicion of several counts of unsolicited assassination, several counts of kidnapping of a Konoha citizen. Shizune went through the short list while Danzo stood in the ring of bared steel, seemingly unaffected. He was an old, wrinkled man, frail-looking, leaning on a cane. No one relaxed an inch because of this. Please surrender into our custody pending further investigation into your affairs, Shizune finished her piece. It needed to be said, Kabuto suspected, if for formality's sake only. So be it, then. Daitapa. The sad way Danzo inclined his head didn't fool Kabuto in the least. He flickered his way through a series of seals that allowed the wind to simply whirl around him, but the Anbu and Shizune weren't as well prepared or as nimble of hand and they were blown away against the walls, the desk falling over Shizune with a crash and a bookcase almost hitting one of the Anbu. Kabuto struck at Danzo too quick for the man to evade him and the strike connected cleanly and with full force. He felt the body of his enemy break beneath his hand, but even as the man landed in a heap, his back twisted at a seemingly unnatural angle, Kabuto knew that it had been much too easy. Martin was foolish enough to prove this by leaping to the old counselor's side and taking a lightning-quick wind jutsu to the chest, falling bleeding on the floor. Fighting in an enclosed space was a skill of its own. Kabuto stepped to the side and watched as Shizune made a daring spurt into the middle of the melee and dragged the badly bleeding man to the minuscule safety the antechamber offered and begun to heal him, her hands glowing gently blue. It was impossible to shine away from the entirety that the office and the antechamber formed, and the heavily enforced walls withstood the tail end of the jutsu strikes that shredded flesh and furniture and covered the floor in water. But while Danzo was the one who inflicted the most damage in the fight, he couldn't seem to finish his opposition. The man was getting on in years. What an uncomfortable age that must be. Now if you'd asked my advice, I'd have told to stay 25, but it's much too late now, he remarked amicably. The water was up to his ankles now and colored delicate, translucent pink. One can hardly stay 25 their whole life, unless they sink to Orochimaru's levels. Danzo answered nonchalantly and dodged a strike from Crane's Tonto. Or yours, was the implication. Kabuto found his mouth stretching into a genuine smile of amusement. Stealing a whole body is wrong, but stealing eyes is all right? Do your morals operate on a weight-based system? Kabuto inquired, and his suspicion that Danzo was more tired than he appeared was confirmed when the man only froze for the briefest of moments before dodging a fire jutsu that left the walls smoldering and pulled at the bandages covering the right side of his face. The short list hadn't included bloodline theft, and Kabuto wondered if the man had still thought he could get away with it all and remain in Konoha. Besides, one perhaps can't help growing older, but two can. With proper assistance you could have ceased at 25. Well, better late than never, I suppose. And without further ado he leapt into the battle again. It was a trick, a feint, this partially reverse-engineered jutsu. He grabbed Danzo's left hand and made a one-handed seal with both their hands. Old or not, Danzo was good. As a snake slithered out from underneath Kabuto's sleeve, Suro, her face now bared by her cracked mask, exhaled wind-infused chakra onto her Tonto to make it longer, deadlier. Danzo twirled both their bodies around, forcing Kabuto to drop on his knees on the wet floor. Suro and Squirrel both struck as Kabuto's snake sunk its teeth into both of their arms, and at the same moment Danzo exhaled blasts of wind blades none of them could dodge at such short range. Then several things happened at once. The poison Kabuto was immune to, that Danzo in all likelihood could neutral as well, was released into their bloodstream. The wind blades stuck through Kabuto's flesh, forcing a pained groan from his lips as red and black spots danced across his vision. But this was the part where he had modified Anko's jutsu, when he released a blast of lightning chakra through the snake's body. Kabuto had been stranger to elation for as long as he could remember, but the sight of Danzo being bodily flung by the lightning bolt struck through him with the rush of the best endorphin release technique. The walls would have withstood the impact easily, but Danzo hit the closed window. 069. Thunder! The door wasn't locked and Tsunade kicked it open with no effort at all. The head of every person in the mess hall turned towards her, standing seemingly alone in the doorway, Sai hidden behind her form. It was a mirthless place, with bare gray walls, plain long tables without tablecloths and plain long benches, no carpets on bare gray floor, and the children dressed in similar plain clothes, in dark blue and black under the harsh, yellow light of the light bulb without a lampshade. Tsunade was distantly aware that her killing intent thrummed through the room in almost audible thunder. She was so out of control it was unacceptable. But maybe it was appropriate all the same. After all, wasn't this whole mess the proverbial lighting from the clear sky, and didn't thunder always follow lightning? There was a man in the room. He wore no mask, but as he flickered to Tsunade in the space between two heartbeats his face was so blank there wasn't much difference. He was quick and silent and powerful, he was merciless, he was at Anbu level. He was so outmatched it wasn't even fun. Tsunade struck fast and she struck bloodlessly to spare the children a little shock, and the man toppled over, groaning a little. These rash youngsters, she sighed and shook her head sadly. They don't make insurgents like they used to. Back when we fought in rain. The children jumped up, drawing kunai, wakizashi and other short swords, the youngest grabbing shuriken and all of them ready to jump her. Tsunade had to hide a smirk. Completely brash, a little fire and no survival instincts at all. Maybe they weren't that different from normal students after all. I am God, I'm Hokage Senju Tsunade, and that man was a traitor to Konoha. She thundered. Stand down and lower your weapons, soldiers. 20 children froze momentarily, their faces reflecting hesitance, some more, some almost managing to hide it. She is the Hokage. I have seen a picture of her, one of the older children said, a boy with brown, cropped hair. Immediately all children hid their kunai and swords and bowed deeply to her. Hokage-sama, they chanted as an eerie underground choir. Not one of them asked a question. We are fighting traitors to Konoha now, Tsunade spoke to them. No need to tell the root forces we're the traitors here, not yet. You are to follow me and my men above ground. Don't engage in battle unless directly ordered to. I declare you ameliorated. Her words were met with pensive silence. But Hokage-sama, there aren't any windows we could be thrown out of. Is this why we are going to the upper levels? The same boy who had recognized her spoke with the slightest strain in his voice. Tsunade blinked. No, that's defenestrate. She means something else, a thin, doe-eyed girl corrected the boy. Tenseness barely there eased at her words and Tsunade realized much to her horror that the kids really had thought she wanted to throw them out of a window. I thought defenestrating meant gelding, the bell-clear voice of a tiny, androgynous child rung out from the middle of the crowd. No, that's castrating and it doesn't count as a natural cause of death even if they are drunk, yet another kid answered. Except if the dead person is Jiraiya-sama. Hair-senpai said so, but she didn't explain why. Wasn't that sabotage? The girl asked. That too, I guess, if they have a really important Kekkei Genkai, but vitiating means sabotaging, the silver-voiced child mused and bit his lower lip, appearing absurdly adorably precocious. Also, wholly disturbing. To ameliorate means making something or someone better. Now, make a crocodile, follow me and don't make any noise, Tsunade interrupted the word of the day calendar recital before it got completely out of hand. She made a mental note that she needed to make several therapist appointments because if children barely of age to enter the academy were contemplating castration as a viable sabotage strategy. None of the children were moving. Do you mean an area effect genjutsu, Hokage-sama? Or should we henge ourselves as crocodiles? The boy who had first spoken up asked her. The youngest haven't been taught either yet. Just form pairs, grab each other's hands and follow me. Tsunade barked, painfully aware that the clock was ticking seconds away and they could be discovered any minute now. And like the world was mocking her, that was when a huge boom rattles the floor under their feet like an underground thunderstorm, the echoes bouncing off the walls. What had happened? They hadn't sent the distress signal and the attack wasn't supposed to start before her group got out. She herded the children out of the mess hall with the help of Kat and Sai, Asp keeping watch in an intersection of tunnels, and swore to herself that unless there were some really mitigating circumstances she was going to do some defenestrating, castrating being a very real possibility as well. 070. Storm. It had been a nice, mild winter so far, but now the fierce wind and the clouds massing southeast of Iwa suggested that a storm was on its way, and it was going to be a big one. It was midnight and Datara was walking home from the mission office, dusty from the road, tired and annoyed and hoping Tomomi hadn't been sent on a mission alone while he had been running after a turned informant halfway across the country. It wasn't that she didn't know how to take care of herself, but he always worried anyway. What if a client lied about the mission parameters? What if the situation simply shifted in an unfavorably way? Datara knew that few plans survived contact with the enemy and any random missing nin wandering through the area might cause trouble. It wasn't that he didn't trust Tomomi to take care of herself, but if the unlikely happened and something happened to her. He walked through the almost empty streets up to Tomomi's house. Iwagakure no Sato was built in a bowl-shaped valley surrounded by steep rock formations and cliff faces and Tomomi's house was one of the upper ones. It was a real house that even had a handkerchief-sized garden, not an apartment, but it was awkwardly shaped, long and narrow with a bathroom where sitting on the toilet required pushing the knees into the shower and a kitchen that was, according to Tomomi, a head injury hazard if even one cabinet door was left open. This was why she was able to afford it with the chonin wages. He had thought about asking her to move in with her, but the time was never right, somehow. If they weren't interrupted by someone at a fateful moment, she'd had a bad day or one of her friends had just been widowed and he always lost his nerve at the last moment. But the life of a ninja was short and perilous and he was determined. Today he would ask her. It was too late. Datara returned to tracks of blood on the floor and the clay statue he had made for Tomomi in pieces on the living room floor. Tomomi, he whispered, a cold, cold hand squeezing his heart, desperation bringing a tang of numb disbelief and despair to his tongue. He walked the apartment like in a bad dream, thinking how she had been supposed to be safe in the village. Through the living room and into the bedroom through the kitchen. The bedroom window was open. No ninja worth their first shuriken would leave a window open, but then, Tomomi hadn't left of her own free will. Now had she? There was a bloody handprint on the windowsill and Datara leaned over it, thinking about how easy it would be to die here, watching over the long drop to the lower levels of the village. But Tomomi had said that suicide wasn't an answer. She had said that wimpy defeatist attitude wasn't allowed in her house. He couldn't jump out of her window. But when he took a step back his foot hit something, sending it clattering over the floor. The house was dark and Datara had to kneel to find the little thing, a piece of ceramic armor. It was a thin sliver that curved ever so slightly, bone white with a reddish-brown stain, and a bright red line. He had to fumble for a light to make certain, but yes, in the corner of that curvy piece of ceramic was the end of a red line. It was a piece of a mask. It was a piece of a mask and Tomomi was nowhere to be seen and there was blood on the floor. Datara couldn't remember how he stumbled back into the living room, but there his foot hit a piece of clay, sending it clattering all over the floor. The noise echoed in his ears, the drum beat, and he stared, he remembered. A part of him was thinking of practicalities, of the inner sanctuary and the Tsuchikage's private library and the classified section of the mission archives as the shattered statue of a dove filled his whole field of vision. Another part finally understood why Tomomi had said that suicide wasn't an answer. She had been right, like always. He had just lost the only person who had ever understood him when even his parents had flinched away from his precocious, disquieting questions. It wasn't fair, but he wasn't looking for fair, and he wasn't looking for death either, not for his own death, anyway. I will be a good shinobi for you, Tomomi-chan. I will find out who is responsible. And then, he looked at the broken piece of art on the floor and smiled. He wasn't looking for fairness, he was just looking for who he could point the blame at and blast away. Art is a blast.